in a world where loyal companions await, one place stands as their beacon of hope. The Pet Resource Center of Hillsborough County, where you can adopt your very own superhero. Adopt a dog. Find your sidekick and unlock the power of unconditional love. Suit up, show up, and adopt today. For more information, visit hcfl.gov/pets. Getting where you need to go shouldn't be a struggle. That's why Hillsborough County offers Sunshine Line, a transportation service for residents who need a little extra help. If you have no mode of transportation, you may qualify for Sunshine Line's door-to-door service based on age, disability, or income. For those who live in the Hart service area, you may be eligible for an income-based bus pass program. Sunshine Line's trained drivers provide safe, shared rides, helping you to and from the vehicle and making sure you're secured every step of the way. Scheduling is simple. Just call 813-272-7272 to see if you qualify and start your application process today. Sunshine Line is here to keep you moving safely, affordably, and with a smile. Visit hcfl.gov/sunshineline to learn more and get started today. Sunshine Line, Hillsborough's ride on the bright side.
Welcome to a meeting of your Planning Commission, the official local planning agency for the cities of Tampa, Temple Terrace, Plant City, and unincorporated Hillsborough County. The Planning Commission provides innovative leadership and long-range vision that contributes to the creation of a thriving, prosperous community that offers opportunity, fairness, and choice in how we live, move, learn, work, and play. For more information about the Planning Commission, please call 813-272-5940. Follow us on social media or visit our website at planhillsborough.org.
Welcome everyone to the December 8th, 2025 regular meeting of the Hillsborough County City-County Planning Commission. We thank you for attending this meeting. Your comments and participation are encouraged. For those attending in person and wishing to speak on any agenda item, please sign the register at the rear of the room and turn off any devices that may be a distraction. To minimize feedback in the audio, all online participants in the meeting will be muted until it is their opportunity to speak. Planning commissioners should unmute themselves to indicate that they would like to speak. Please be sure to state your name at the beginning of your remarks for the benefit of the clerk. There will be an opportunity for members of the public to provide comments. When your name is called, you will be unmuted when it is your turn to speak. Please wait until the chair calls on you to begin speaking. State your name at the beginning of your comments and adhere to the time limits. If anyone has difficulties or is watching via HTV and would like to provide comments to be included in the record for the local government hearing, please email them to planner@plancom.org. For action items, the meeting will be conducted as follows. The agenda item will be introduced. Staff will give their presentation with a 15-minute time limit. The applicant will be given the opportunity to make a presentation with a 15-minute time limit. Following presentations, members of the public may address the Planning Commission when recognized by the chair. Public comment will be heard for 3 minutes per person. The applicant will be afforded a 3-minute period for rebuttal response. Planning commissioners will ask questions. Public comment will be closed. Then upon a motion, a second, and discussion, a vote will be taken. With that introduction, I would like you all to join me in the invocation and pledge of allegiance. Would all please rise. Heavenly Father, we come before you today with praise for your mighty power and guidance. We thank you for this day and thank you too for the many blessings in our lives, for our great country, and for the opportunity to live in freedom. We ask your blessings on our leaders, and we ask that you give each one of us here today the wisdom to make the right choices so that our decisions will be in the best interest of the people of Hillsborough County. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, and with that, we will deviate for just a moment and go to our oath of office for our new Planning Commissioner, Matthew Sink. Kick it over to the clerk.
Can you please repeat after me? I, please state your name,
I, Matthew Sink,
a Planning Commission appointee
Planning Commission appointee
of the City of Tampa,
of the City of Tampa,
do solemnly swear or affirm
do solemnly swear and affirm
that I will faithfully perform
that I will faithfully perform
the duties of my appointed office
the duties of my appointed office
in a fair, equitable,
in a fair and equitable,
ethical, and dignified manner,
ethical and dignified manner,
in compliance with all applicable laws
in compliance with all applicable laws
of the State of Florida,
of the State of Florida,
City of Tampa,
City of Tampa,
and the practices and procedures
practice
established by the Planning Commission.
Planning.
Thank you.
All right, congratulations. Did you want to tell us a little bit about yourself? Make a statement there.
Sure. My name is Matt Sink. I'm a Tampa Heights resident. I have about 25 years of leadership experience for national home builders, development, construction. I worked for a real estate technology company and spend a lot of time in the community, specifically in Tampa Heights, through their land use committee, and I was their president of the association for a little bit. So I'm super excited to be on the board. I've been in front of this board before, so I kind of know how it runs a little bit, and I'm excited to be part of it.
All right, welcome aboard.
Thank you so much.
And we'll welcome back Commissioner Kugler, who was also reappointed to a brand new 4-year term of his own after finishing out Commissioner Saria's term. So welcome to both of you. All right, and with that, I will send it back to the clerk again for a roll call, please.
Bowden,
Here.
Cardenas, Kona,
Here.
Jameson,
Here.
Kugler,
Here.
Linkos,
Here.
Lauk, Sieben, Sink,
Here.
Horton, Barry,
Here.
Chair Joseph.
Here.
You have a quorum, sir.
Thank you. All right, our next item of business is the approval of the minutes for the following meetings: Hillsborough County Planning Commission regular meeting minutes, October 13th, 2025, and Hillsborough County Planning Commission public hearing on Hillsborough County Plan Amendments meeting minutes, October 13th, 2025. Commissioner Bowden?
Motion to approve.
All right.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Bowden to approve, second by Commissioner Kona. Are there any comments, discussions from the commissioners before we take our vote? Then we'll all signify their agreement by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. All right. Next agenda item is number 2, public input. We had one individual sign up for public input for items not scheduled on the agenda, and that is Cammie Corbett.
Good afternoon, Cammie Corbett with the law firm of Hill, Ward, and Henderson. Just a point of order, Chair. I actually want to provide comments on item O, but since it's not an action item, I didn't know whether I should make those comments now or wait till item O, whatever your pleasure is.
No, it's now, yeah.
Okay, that's what I thought. Here to talk to you about item O. It's somewhat of an unusual comp plan amendment because it's rather large. It is land owned by the Thomas family. They've owned it for decades. They have it's about 8,000 acres, and about 2,000 acres of that is already protected by a conservation easement. And so we are asking for consideration of the PEC 1/2 category, which is the category directly to the west on US 301 that's known as the Two Rivers Ranch. The Thomas family also owned that land at one point in time, but they do not. And when they were the authors of the original PEC category to provide significant environmental protection to the land for the long-term future. At the time, because of estate planning laws, they did not include this land, but those laws have evolved, and they are now able to impose, get entitlements on these properties and not have negative tax consequences. So it is their goal and their intent to preserve this property long-term and to protect it from more suburbanized development. And so that's the context in which we come forward asking for this plan amendment during this cycle. And I just wanted to provide you that background so you had that in your mindset as you're reviewing it and preparing to review it. And with that, I'm here to answer your questions you might have.
Thank you. All right. And I have a quick question for you before you go away. Obviously, it's coming to us for a briefing later, and staff hasn't really spoken on it, so I'm just wondering why you may have felt compelled to come speak that. Do you feel that staff's not going to cover that, or that there's
I don't think they typically do provide you contact. I've noticed at a couple of briefings recently that whatever, like even the Saffold, what we call Saffold add-on pieces for down in WVR2, that context is not really being brought forward as to why it's coming forward that way, because they just kind of give you the general layout of that information. And so I think it's important as an applicant that I provide you with that context when you're hearing it. And so you don't have this question about like, well, wow, this isn't a lot of property. And wow, that looks like there's environmentally sensitive land here. Yes, there is. It's under a conservation easement. And so that's why I thought it was necessary to provide that context up front.
Okay, thank you very much. All right. We will move on to our next item of business. We will start with our action items. And first, we will start with 3A, Port Tampa Bay Standard Work Permit Application number 25-006, Metroport. And the presenter is Diego Guerra.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Diego Guerra, Planning Commission staff. As mentioned, this is Port Tampa Bay Standard Work Permit 25006, the Metroport redevelopment. The review was conducted for consistency with the Tampa Comprehensive Plan and in accordance with chapters 95, 488, and 95, 97, 351 of the laws of Florida. The site is located within the city of Tampa, specifically within the Channelside District. Channelside Drive is located immediately to the west, with Ybor City to the north, and the Tampa cruise terminals, or the cruise terminals directly to the south. The site is a man-made slip within the Hardin Cruise Terminal and cargo shipping Hardin dredged berthing area. The site itself is void of aquatic vegetation, natural habitat, and consists of a silty bottom. The applicant requests to fill the site in order to redevelop the slip to allow for future cruise ship berthing, which falls in line with the port's goals of growing the cruise terminal area per its master plan. The request aligns with the future land use section policy specific to city design that promote a range of uses in close proximity to one another and encourage investment in public infrastructure and amenities. Furthermore, policies that discuss the encouragement of economic opportunities for the downtown and Channelside districts, coupled with policies that discuss directing future population concentrations away from the coastal hazard area and limiting new development in the coastal hazard area while giving preference to uses that are water enhanced, water related, water dependent, or are shown to support the Port Tampa Bay's master plan are consistent and in line with the request. Ladies and gentlemen, the Planning Commission staff recommends the Port Tampa Bay Standard Work Permit 25006 be found consistent with the goals, objectives, and policies of the Tampa Comprehensive Plan. This concludes my presentation. I'm available for any questions.
All right. Did the applicant have a presentation? I heard there may be an applicant
no,
here.
they did not.
Okay. All right. I don't believe we had anyone sign up in the public comment for this item. No, we did not. So I will turn it over to the commissioners for questions, comments, discussions on this item. Not seeing a lot of action. Then I will go on ahead and close the public comment on this item and open it up to motions from the planning commissioners. Commissioner Kona.
Yeah, motion to find the Port Tampa Bay Standard Work Permit application number 25006, Metroport, consistent with the comprehensive plan.
Commissioner Jemison.
Second.
All right. Yep. We have a motion of consistency finding by Commissioner Kona, a second to that motion by Commissioner Jemison. Any questions, comments, discussions from the commissioners before we take our vote? Not seeing any, then would all signify their agreement by saying aye.
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 Those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. All right. Next up, item 3B, we have Temple Terrace Comprehensive Plan Visioning Contract, and the presenter is, again, Diego Guerra.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Diego Guerra, Planning Commission staff. Again, this item is the Temple Terrace Comprehensive Plan Visioning Contract. Just a little administrative footnote. This is, as the contract is over $50,000, it does require authorization by the Planning Commission for the Executive Director to sign and sign the contract. The contract is part of the agenda packet. A little bit of background. The contract was initially planned in collaboration with the University of South Florida's Masters in Urban Regional Planning Program studio class. However, due to a lack of enrollment in that particular class, that class was postponed. And in order to maintain the work schedule on track and staff's limited capacity due to tight timeline and the concurrent commitments such as the Planned City Comprehensive Plan Visioning that's also going up at the same time, staff pivoted to procure a consultant for the project. With the goal of designing and implementing a robust public engagement strategy to guide the visioning process, which will lead to the development of a vision that reflects the aspirations, priorities of Temple Terrace's residents, businesses, and stakeholders. The RFP announcement was released with a duration of 6 months and a contract amount not to exceed at $87,000. So again, the RFP was released in late August, and we received a total of 2 proposals, one coming from Ayers Associates, the second coming from Conscious Community Connectors. Both applicants were interviewed. Both their written and oral presentations were evaluated by the selection committee on a 100-point scale. The selection committee was comprised of Yanika Mills, an executive planner with the Planning Commission. She's also the liaison for both the cities of Plant City and Temple Terrace, and is the co-project manager of this project. Sofia Garantiva, which is the principal planner with the Planning Commission. Erica Flores, the strategic communications manager with the Planning Commission. Additionally, Temple Terrace city staff A member of their staff was designated to be part of the selection committee. However, due to a last-minute schedule conflict, they had to bow out and weren't replaced by the city. Both proposals were competitive. Overall, AIRS proposed 3 stakeholder meetings, 3 community-wide meetings with presentations to both you and the City Council, with an optional focus group and a non-traditional engagement at an extra cost. Conscious Community Connectors proposed 5 stakeholder meetings, 3 community workshops, 3 additional pop-up events, a presentation to you and the City Council. Furthermore, their proposal utilizes MERP students from USF enrolled in the MERP program in coordination with other designated stakeholders that they have identified as force multipliers for the contract. The selection committee unanimously selected the Conscious Community Connectors based on their innovation, their ability to reach out to the community, and additional aspects that were either optional or not included under the AIRS Associates proposal, but standard under theirs. Ladies and gentlemen, the project is organized into 3 task areas as depicted on the slide. Task 1 is basic early on data collection, which goes into them collecting and reviewing the 2016 vision, other documents, and developing the engagement plan. Task 2 involves the community outreach portion, which is the large chunk of this project. It goes into the workshops, the pop-ups, the stakeholder sessions, and that also include a multilingual survey. And then finally, task 3, is the final vision development, which begins with the compilation, the collation, the synthesis, and ultimately concludes with the presenting of findings and ultimately a vision that will set the tone for the commencement of the Temple Terrace Comprehensive Plan update. This slide just depicts the timeline. As you can see, it's broken up evenly between 2 months, beginning in winter 2026, specifically tentatively to commence on January 5th, 2026, and to conclude no later than July 5th, 2026. Ladies and gentlemen, Planning Commission recommends that you authorize the Executive Director to sign the contract for the Temple Terrace Comprehensive Plan Visioning contract. That concludes my presentation. I'm available for any questions that you may have.
All right, thank you. We didn't have anyone sign up in the public comment for this item, so I will turn it over to commissioners for questions. Commissioner Coleman?
So it's going to start in 2025, right? And
2026.
Okay, so winter 2026.
Correct. So January 5th, 2026, and to conclude no later than July 2026.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
All right, are there any other questions? Commissioner Singh?
Quick question regarding, did they define what a pop-up was and how
So,
that
yes,
works?
sir, they did. Essentially is them attending, either going to the library during a whether as up a small little tent with surveys at that event. Expected, not planned, up on mobilize and attend those to gain and garner public participation.
Perfect. And I have a follow-up question, which is, was there a breakdown between number of in-person and the number of online engagements?
There were not. Majority of them are in person. I believe they did discuss a specific number for online. But I don't have that number on me. I can get that to you if you want. Yes, sir.
All right. Any other? I did have a quick question. I wanted to know if we got any feedback from the city of Temple Terrace or the mayor on the selection of the 2 consultants.
We did reach out to staff, the planning staff. They didn't have any feedback other than thank you and look forward to working with them in the future.
All right. Sounds good. Are there any other questions or comments from the commissioners on this one? Not seeing any, then I'll go on ahead and close the public comment on this item and open it up to motions from the commissioners. Anyone? Commissioner Kugler.
I move that we approve this proposal.
All right. Commissioner Linkus.
I'll second.
All right, we got a motion to authorize the executive director to sign the contract or agreement, and a second to that motion by Commissioner Linkus. Are there any questions or discussion items from the commissioner before we take our vote? Not seeing any, then would all signify their agreement by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. All right, thank you very much, Mr. Guerra. Next up, we have item 3C. City of Temple Terrace Land Development Code Text Amendment, Sections 12-357 and 12-354, Administrative Subdivision Plat Approvals. And the presenter is Unica Mills and Alyssa Livingstone.
Good afternoon, Unica Mills Planning Commission staff. I'm here to introduce Alyssa Livingstone, Temple Terrace Community Development staff. She'll be presenting the Land Development Code Amendment regarding administrative subdivision plat approvals. Due to this change in state law, the city requested that this item be expedited. So this will be the first time you all will be seeing this, this action item before you this afternoon. And with that, Alyssa Livingstone.
Good afternoon. My name is Alyssa Livingstone, and I'm the senior planner with the City of Temple Terrace. I'm here to present proposed text amendments to our Land Development Code that ensures full compliance with a recent mandate from the Florida statutes, specifically Section 177.071. The overall intent of this legislative update is to streamline plat approvals. Section 177.071 of the Florida statutes now requires all municipalities to designate an administrative official to approve final plats and replats. To comply with this state mandate and streamline our development review process, we recommend designating the city manager for this administrative function. Implementing this change requires amending Section 12357. Additionally, the city is proposing to make corresponding adjustments to Section 12354, which governs preliminary plat reviews. This action ensures the preliminary plat review process aligns with the new legislative requirement for final plat approvals, creating a cohesive development review process. Currently, in Section 12357, subsection C, after the DRC review is complete, the city engineer confirms completeness and compliance, and then the plat is sent to the city council for final sign-off. In Section 12357, subsection D, following final approval by city council, the city engineer coordinates the recording of the plat. The updated text dictates that the plat be forwarded to the city manager for final approval instead of the city council. This change recognizes that plat approval is primarily an administrative action, and it removes it from the city council's legislative agenda. Currently, in Section 12354, subsection G, any applicant wishing to appeal a preliminary disapproval goes before the city council. If amended, the appeal would be directed to the city manager. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. That's what I thought. You coming back up, Unica?
And Planning Commission staff has reviewed this text amendment and found it to be consistent with the goals, objectives, and policies of the Temple Terrace Comprehensive Plan, specifically Objective 8.5 and Policy 8.5.3, which relate to the development of approvals being consistent with the Land Development Code as well as state regulations. And I stand for any questions.
All right, thank you very much. We didn't have anyone sign up in the public comment on this one, so I will turn it over to the commissioners for questions, comments, thoughts on this one. Not seeing a lot of action. Commissioner Linkus.
I don't mean to derail things too much from the subject at hand, but I just want to say it's in case maybe some of you all don't realize, I'm sorry if this is too much of a side point, but Alyssa is a graduate of our program. Diego, who we first heard from, is a graduate of the MERP program. The MERP program, although we weren't able to partner with the Temple Terrace project in the short run, we have now kind of found a new way to do that moving forward. So I just, in case you all weren't aware, our program is really graduating so many of the students who are involved in community development in this area. So it's just so fun to sit up here and see one after another the students who are graduates of the program really impacting the community. And I guess I'm just excited because just about a week ago we did hear from our reaccrediting board, and for the first time ever the program has an exemplary status, and it's just such a nice thing to see our folks doing this work, and I just wanted to make sure all of the commissioners knew about what this program does and how important and vital it is to the work that we're doing here every day. So I'm sorry to go away from the topic at hand for just a moment, but it's just such a pleasure to see everyone out here and to see that the work that we're doing is really impacting a lot of communities.
All right. Are there any other comments, thoughts, questions from the commissioners on this one? Not seeing a lot of action. I'm going to close the public comment on this one and open it up to motions from the commissioners on this one. Commissioner Linkus.
I'll make a motion to find the City of Temple Terrace Land Development Code Text Amendment Sections 12357 and 12354 Administrative Subdivision Plat approvals consistent with the Temple Terrace Comprehensive Plan.
Motion to consistency finding. Commissioner Bowden.
I second the motion.
All right, we have a motion to consistency finding by Commissioner Linkus. Second to that motion by Commissioner Bowden. Are there any questions, comments from the commissioners before we take our votes? Not seeing any, then we'll all signify their agreement by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. All right, our next agenda item, item 3D, unincorporated Hillsborough County Land Development Code Text Amendment 26-0189, implementation of the requirements of Senate Bill 954 for certified recovery residences. And the presenter is Tyreek Royal.
Good afternoon, everyone. Tyreek Royal, Planning Commission staff, and I'll be presenting Israel Monsanto from Development Services, and he'll give an overview of this LDC amendment.
Okay. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Israel Monsanto, Hillsborough County Development Services. This is item LDC 26-0189. Implementation of the requirements of Senate Bill 954 for certified recovery residences. This amendment will provide procedural requirements for reasonable accommodation requests for certified recovery residences that are necessary to implement Chapter 2025-182, or what is called Senate Bill 954. State legislation requires now that the county to adopt an ordinance that establishes procedures for the review and approval for certified recovery residences within its jurisdiction, and this includes a procedure for consideration of requests for reasonable accommodation from Land Development Code regulations that would prohibit the establishment of a certified recovery residence. A reasonable accommodation is a waiver to a requirement or policy that allows disabled persons to use a residential dwelling. Our Land Development Code Part 20200 will add Section 20207, procedure for the review and approval for certified recovery residences, to specify the requirements and review procedures. Additionally, the implementing procedures will be added to our Development Review Procedures Manual under a new section 9.8. And this adoption of the ordinance must occur per Florida statute before January 1st, 2026. And this concludes my presentation.
Planning Commission staff have reviewed this text amendment 260189 and found it to be consistent with the goals, objectives, and policies in the comprehensive plan, including policy 4.1.2, which relates to the requirement that development meet all established land development regulations. And that is a conclusion of my presentation. I'm here for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. We didn't have anyone sign up for the public comment on this one, so I will turn it over to the planning commissioners for questions, comments, discussion. Not seeing a lot of excitement in the room, so going once, going twice. I will close the public comment on this item and open it up to motions from the commissioners on this item. Commissioner Conan.
Yeah, motion to find unincorporated Hillsborough County Land Development Code Text Amendment 260189, implementation of the requirements of Senate Bill 945 for certified recovery residences consistent with the comprehensive plan.
All right, Commissioner Kugler.
Second.
All right, we have a motion of consistency finding by Commissioner Kona, a second to that motion by Commissioner Kugler. Are there any questions, comments, or discussions from the commissioners before we take our vote? Not seeing any, then we'll all signify their agreement by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. All right. Next up on our agenda, we have item 3E, unincorporated Hillsborough County Land Development Code, LDC Text Amendment 25-1126, Wellhead and Surface Water Resource Protection. And the presenter is, again, Tyreek Royal.
Good afternoon, everyone. Again, Tyreek Royal, Planning Commission staff, and I'll be introducing Kimberly Cruz from Environmental Services, and she'll give an overview of this LDC amendment.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Kim Cruz, Environmental Supervisor of Hillsborough County Environmental Services Division, presenting to you today for the consolidation of regulations for the removal of Wellhead Resource Protection Area Zone 1 to improve the current Land Development Code text for clarity and to update the review frequency to align with Tampa Bay Water's Water Master Plan updates. And then this request is due to the Wellhead Resource Protection Area map amendments that were proposed to remove Wellhead Resource Protection Area 1. And then also to allow flexibility for the county to review and provide map updates between review cycles to respond to any kind of new wellhead or surface water protection areas that may arise in the future. And that's all I have for you.
All right. Thank you. Mr. Royal.
Planning Commission staff have reviewed this text amendment 251126 and found it to be consistent with the goals, objectives, and policies in the comprehensive plan, including policy 4.1.2, which relates to the requirement that developments meet established land development regulation, One Water Objective 1.3, and One Water Policy 1.3.8, which call for the continuation of a comprehensive wellhead and surface water protection program based on the adopted mapping, and One Water Policy 1.3.9, which promotes the regular review, updating, and maintenance of regulations, criteria, standards, methodologies, and procedures related to water resource protection areas. Thank you.
Thank you. We didn't have anyone sign up for the public comment on this item, so I will turn it over to the commissioners for questions, comments, or discussions of this item. Not seeing a lot of action. I will just say for myself, Ms. Cruz, good job. I know I gave you and your engineer a pretty tough time the first time through on this one, but the Board of County Commissioners has saw fit to advance this, which is their purview, and so I have not much to say this time, so good work. All right. Are there any other questions, comments from the commissioners? Not seeing any at this time, then I'll go ahead and close public comment and open it up to motions from the commissioners on this one. Commissioner Kona.
Motion to find Hillsborough County Land Development Code Text Amendment 25116, wellhead and surface water resource protection consistent with the comprehensive plan.
All right. Motion, Commissioner Kugler.
Second, yes.
All right. I have a motion of consistency finding by Commissioner Kona, a second to that motion by Commissioner Kugler. Are there any questions, comments from the commissioners before we take our vote? And all signify their agreement by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. All right. Next up on our agenda, we have briefings and a lot of them. So we will start with briefing 4A, Urban Expansion Area Planning Study, I-4 Corridor and Little Manatee South status update. And the presenter is Sophia Garantiva.
All right, good afternoon, Commissioners. Sophia Garantiva, Planning Commission staff, again presenting on the status update of the Urban Expansion Area Planning Study for Interstate 4 and Little Manatee South. And as brief as possible, but there is of the start with unincorporated Hillsborough County's flu update, updated the urban service area and growth management policies. This led to the BOCC, the Board of County Commissioners' request in 2023 for staff to identify areas for potential expansion of the USA. Staff identified 4 areas as shown on the map. These areas were initially selected by analyzing areas that were outside of the current urban service area, where population was projected to grow, where larger concentrations of vacant developable land were located, while avoiding natural preservation and protected lands. The BOCC then directed to expand the urban service area in the Waimama and Baum areas first, as outlined in green and orange. We refer to this work as Phase 1. The BOCC then directed that the other two areas along Interstate 4 and the Little Manatee South be studied, including infrastructure, needs, and possible funding, as shown in purple and yellow. This is considered Phase 2, which is the subject of the UEA planning study. And just for larger context, the urban service area and the expansion of that boundary is just one strategy we have as part of an effort to address population and employment growth. The goal of the USA specifically is to focus 80% of new growth and redevelopment within that boundary to align public and private infrastructure investment. So that brings us back to the goal of the study itself, which is to provide recommendations to the Board of County Commissioners on whether and where to consider future expansion of the urban service area. The consultant team is led by H.W. Lochner. Duration of the study is 18 months starting from July 2025, which was when the contract was authorized. And the contract amount is for $350,000. And we are evaluating under the Urban Expansion Area UEA policy framework in FLU Objective 1.3. And as a refresher, the UEA includes a detailed plan to guide phased development and make new development within these plan areas include infrastructure planning and funding. Again, this ties back to the BOCC's request. There is a list of criteria that a UEA needs to address, including development locations and land use transitions, public facility and transportation needs, environmental coordination, fiscal impact and policy strategies, and community engagement. All of these are being addressed through the analysis and deliverables that are part of this study. So with that framework in mind, I'll shift to where we are in the process. This is a busy timeline, but if you just read it from left to right, you'll notice right away that the workflow for the two study areas is staggered. When we kicked off the study, we evaluated both of the geographies and identified that the Little Manatee South area is experiencing a little bit more immediate development pressure. So we decided to advance that area first. So staggering again the work plan allows the team to focus the efforts, sequence the tasks more efficiently, and apply some lessons learned across both areas as we move through this process. Little Manatee South deliverables are shown in blue, and the I-4 corridor is shown in green, following a slightly later track. The timing also aligns with Plant City's concurrent comprehensive plan visioning process, which helps minimize confusion by staggering the public engagement across two efforts. And then the items in gray apply to both areas. So what we've completed so far, we've held our first larger format staff coordination advisory meetings. We have also finalized the public engagement work plan, and I'll walk through those pieces in a little more detail in the next slides. And where we are today, shown by the yellow bar, for Little Manatee South, and the existing conditions and market study are actively underway, and we're preparing for our first round of community meetings. The I-4 corridor analysis is progressing closely behind. And as we look ahead, throughout 2026, both study areas will move into the land use scenario development, infrastructure and fiscal impact assessments, and additional rounds of public engagement. We anticipate round 2 being where those scenarios are presented to the public, and during that same period, summer 2026, we'll be workshopping those scenarios with the Planning Commission and the Board of County Commissioners. Finally, we do anticipate bringing final recommendations for both areas in early 2027. Again, this is just recommendations at that point in time. All right, so jumping into some of those details on the coordination deliverables, we have held a staff level intergovernmental coordination kickoff meeting on September 30th, and we had our first of our bi-monthly, every other month technical advisory committee meetings on November 18th. The TAC meeting included attendees from various departments in Hillsborough County, as well as the school district, Hart, and Plant City. We've also had follow-up meetings with county staff and with Plant City staff. For existing conditions, a major part of that has been data collection, including demographic data, existing service capacities like emergency services and water and wastewater. Also analysis of current real estate market conditions to identify drivers of demand and understand the dynamics and impacts of growth in the areas. And those will be factored into creating those scenarios. Additionally, A review of the initial boundaries for both areas was performed by the consultant team. The memos outlining the recommendations are included in the agenda packet, but for Little Manatee South, the consultant recommended to adjust the boundaries to include additional lands, approximately 750 additional acres. This refinement captures areas previously highlighted in earlier planning efforts and areas likely to be influenced by longer-term development patterns and concurrent planning efforts along US 41 and I-75. For the I-4 study area, no major adjustments were recommended, but land along the eastern boundary that has been annexed into Plant City will not be examined as part of this study. And based on conversations we've had with Plant City staff, we'll depict the Plant City vision area on our maps since it overlaps with the study area. I also want to note that the Plant City vision area is actively used by the city as a part of their efforts to address growth as well. So this is the Little Manatee South area. The original boundary is outlined in a green dashed line following US 41 to the west and I-75 to the east. The boundary adjustment is shown in a solid green line, including lands west of 41 and east of 75. So this brings the study area acreage from 9,455 acres to 10,213 acres. The Interstate 4 study area boundary has changed only slightly by removing areas annexed into Plant City, which is about 100 acres in total so far. We anticipate the boundary to continue to change as areas may be annexed. You could also see that the Plant Vision area boundary in purple. And last but not least, just a little more detail on the public engagement portion of the study. We've had a website up since July, and this is the main hub of information for the study. The public can submit comments, view upcoming engagement opportunities, access data, documents, interactive maps, and surveys. We've given updates to the Agricultural Economic Development Council and the Tampa Bay Builders Association. As mentioned, we are preparing for the first round of community engagement meetings that will focus on building general awareness of the study, address initial questions, and we will be gathering early insights that will help guide the scenario development. And as previously mentioned, Little Manatee is moving ahead in January, February with those meetings, and I-4 will be following in March, April. So again, the next steps are finalizing the existing conditions reports for both areas, as well as the real estate market studies for both areas. The community meeting for Little Manatee, the meetings for Little Manatee South, as we mentioned, will be held on January 27th for a virtual meeting, and then February 5th and 7th in person at the South County Career Acceleration Academy. Those were just confirmed on Friday. And the launch of the online survey will also occur next month. We'll also continue holding our TAC meetings and update the BOCC and the TPC, the Planning Commission, as the study progresses. That concludes my presentation. Staff is available for any questions, as well as the consultant.
Thank you. Any questions, discussion? Commissioner Sink.
Thank you for your presentation. A quick question. I know that the TPO, there's a TIP amendment out there for the expansion of I-4 for the express lanes. Will that be a part of the analysis or the study when you guys are doing your work on how that'll impact the area?
A bit more on it. Be within the existing I-4. It seemed like right now it affect the lands that are surrounding it. So we're going to keep on DOT.
Commissioner Kugler.
Yes. The for is that been considered, or is it still large for the area?
Let me just go back to the map. So we do recognize that some of these areas are encroaching into the coastal high hazard area. The reason that we're including them is because they all have the same landowner, so we just wanted to keep that consistent. But we will consider that as we look into it. We don't anticipate, again, any development in that area, but we wanted to include it in the study area because it was all under the same ownership.
I see some
that doesn't allow for any development, and that would have to be changed with probably the landowner's consent, if through this process it was determined there was going to be any growth there. So
That interchange. That's partially one of the reasons why we expanded the boundary in that direction, knowing that that was a potential future development project.
Right. I wanted to, I guess, flip the script. I was kind of focused more on the I-4 corridor when I looked at this information. And I was wondering, since we're losing area because of the proximity to Plant City, I know in the report currently where we stand now, and we have a long way to go, the consultant was thinking about not adding any more areas to the boundary as we had it. I was just wondering if, you know, that might change in the future. Is there any possibility that those the I-4 corridor initial boundary area might have to expand to take in more land depending on how much developable land we find in that area? Any thoughts towards those things? Or are we just at a wall, like it is what it was and we're only taking away from it?
can you show the map again, Sophia, for the I-4 corridor?
Yep, it's up.
Oh, it's up. Okay,
Yep.
they weren't showing it on HTV. They got it now. Thank you. I mean, I think my response would be, one, if we need more area and we find out that area just to the north or just to the south of State Road 60 needs to be included, then we will continue to adjust as we go through the process. But I think largely this whole area is being expanded into, it's just a question of who's doing the expanding, whether it's coming from Plant City or whether it's coming from the county. And that's some of what the initial conversations with Plant City have been focused on, like how do we coordinate that planning so that if from the purple line east is being served by Plant City, but it's currently in the county, like we still need to work together on the planning of all of that. So I don't, but yes, if somewhere we need to add additional land, because it makes sense, certainly as we go through the outreach process, we would do that.
Okay, that was more my question,
Yeah.
whether it's a brick wall and a hard line. So my second question I wanted to ask about was, I've heard some, and I know we're going to reach out to the agriculture community, we always do that, but I've heard some speak in channels that certain areas of this, certain regions in this area are highly good farming land. So I'm wondering, are we taking that into account as we, transition these areas into more density and stuff like that? Again, I know we're reaching out to the agriculture community, but as consultants, I see former Commissioner Benson sitting in the back there. As an agency, I'm wondering if we're keeping that in mind. Commissioner Linkus often brings up the fact that, not only are these boundaries to direct growth in, they're also to protect agricultural and natural areas outside. So I want to be sure that we're very cognizant of that as we go forward with these things. If there's land that we could be using for farming better than we could be using for subdivisions, that should be clearly, delineated sort of in the stuff that comes before us. So.
Thank you. Noted, yes.
Okay. I see a lot of nodding going on.
Absolutely. And I think the team specifically has an agriculturally oriented.
Yes, we
Talk
have
about that a
a
little.
sub-consultant, part of the engagement team that will be providing some of that insight and making those connections. We've already been to the AADC once, and we plan to include them into the TAC as well to give them more regular updates. So we're definitely keeping that in mind, the agricultural community in mind.
Okay. And one more quick question, Ms. Ornito will probably be able to answer best. Do we have any sort of, because we ran into this issue at the edge of Plant City there, but as an agency, our planning commission, do we keep a track of annexation areas or potential annexation areas? Like, do we know where Plant City is thinking about annexing next in sort of broad-based ways?
Yes, their vision plan does articulate that. And then more specifically in the Northeast Master Plan area, we have even more detail. And I think what we're talking with them about is do we need to arrive at additional detail in some of the other directions as they plan outward.
Very good. I want to make sure we're not stepping on toes here. Commissioner Kugler.
Yes, thank you. Maybe in the existing conditions report, we'll see where the top-notch farmland lines out. We can look for it. Thank you.
All right. Good point. All right. Commissioner Sink.
A quick question. Did you have a slide on there that said a list of stakeholders? I think I saw 2 on there. Is that right?
Yes.
I think it was Tampa Bay Builders Association and somebody else.
Apologies. Yes.
Thank you. It was an agricultural. Okay, my question was, was there someone from the ag industry or from that segment that was active in it? So perfect. Thank you.
All right. Any more questions, comments, discussion items from the commissioners? Not seeing any. We'll thank you for the information, and we will move on to our next agenda item, 4B, West Beta Bay Boulevard Land Use Study, and the presenter is Jay Collins.
Thank you, Mayor. Hi, good afternoon. Jay Collins, Planning Commission staff. Staff is here today to provide for you information related to the West Beta Bay Land Use Study. So this is actually something that was asked of staff by this board back in May. There was a public hearing that night for the city of Tampa along Beta Bay. I believe it was TA CPA 2501. I don't know, 7,000, 8,000 square feet on the south side of Beta Bay. We'll show you that. That has now become effective. It was adopted by the city of Tampa. So we'll talk a little bit about that. You can think of this as a table of contents, a little background, a little data, some considerations and some next steps. Considerations, when we get to that, that's basically staff sitting around in a room and doing some point counterpoint. And the reason we put that in there is because it basically sets it up for this body as a point counterpoint of what you may or may not want staff to do next, or for direction on your end of this, right? So it basically just gives you some ideas of what could happen next with this. So I'm going to go first through a little bit of the study area. It seemed like all of the interest was down on Himes to Del Mabry in that area, because that is where primarily you've got the residential 10, you've got some residential 20, you've got some urban mixed-use 6 in that area in South Tampa. But historically, and we've looked at this corridor before, we've looked at this going west to east from Del Mabry all the way to McDill, because that is more of the historic pattern that you have for Palmacia in this area. Also on this, you'll see what we looked at is 34 acres. So we looked at the frontage on Beta Bay and also what abuts it, some of the residential behind it. So that gives us 137 housing units total, and it gives us just over 1,000 jobs, just under 300 residents living along the corridor. So some growth trends that we got from Yasser Gonzalez. Basically, you've seen some population and seen some employment that has increased in this area for the entirety of it. Primarily, you've seen more employment growth as of late, and you'll see as you go forward from where we are today into 2035, probably a little bit more population growth that have here, and you can see some of the graphs. Now, when you dive down into it, you're like, but there's only 19 residential units in this. One of the things that's interesting about South Tampa, really anywhere in unincorporated Hillsborough County, or Hillsborough County, city of Tampa, all of it, but specifically when you look down at the Interbay Peninsula, is you get a lot of 2-bedroom, 1-bath homes that are replaced one for one, but they're replaced with a 4 or 5-bedroom home. So you are actually getting additional population in that area out of some place that had a smaller housing stock with a larger home in that area. All right, 1 mile buffer, 2 mile buffer. If we were talking about 674 down in Waimama, a 2 mile buffer is not a lot. Where we are on Beta Bay, a 2 mile buffer is pretty big. That goes all the way over to West Shore, it goes all the way up to Kennedy, it's going to go all the way down to Gandy, it's going to go all the way over to Davis Islands. So that gives you, when you see that number for new residential or new commercial establishments, think about that swath that we're talking about there. So looking down a little bit at the land use that we have, let's go west to east. So from Del Mabry, you actually have residential 20. The residential 20 that you have on Del Mabry right there, as well as the residential 6 that's directly to the north, is kind of interesting in this area of the city of Tampa. It's been that way. We can show you some maps for a very long time. And we've had some conversations about that over the years. As you continue down, you can see that suburban mixed-use 6 on the south side of Beta Bay. One of those is an amendment that came in 1999. The other is a historic land use from the zoning that was there prior to the plan being adopted back in the 90s. That salmon color is that residential 10. The yellow directly to the north of that salmon color is that residential 6. You've got that pink, that's basically your community mixed use 35. The red is the community commercial 35. The community commercial and the community mixed use 35s, as we know, that is the bread and butter of commercial development that we have in the city of Tampa. 35 units to the acre, a 2.0 on the floor area ratio, allows for mixed use development and a variety of other things. When you see that residential 20 and those residential 10, can you get non-residential uses in there? Yes, you can, but they're either location specific or it's specific to the block face already having a certain percentage of uses there that are already non-residential. And you'll also see the residential 20 on the back side. That residential 20 is very interesting in this area. If you are from this area or you've been interested in planning in the city of Tampa for a number of years, you're probably looking at that and you're looking at the checkerboard. We're going to talk about the checkerboard of the residential 10 and the residential 20. This is our historic look. This is circa 1998. These are the plat maps. You can see these maps that we have these available online. You can go to our image library, or you can go into about half of our offices because we have these old books in our offices. Let's go east to west this time. Let's start at McDill and Bay to Bay. That's actually heavy commercial 24. That is the precursor of what is community commercial 35, and then you have the CMU 35. We like to talk about this because, again, just because the color on the map has remained the same for 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years does not necessarily mean that there is not more intensity or density associated with it. That's actually was heavy commercial 24. The plan back 20, 30 years ago almost discouraged residential development in heavy commercial 24. Today, community commercial 35 is a little bit more lenient. There is some policy. They do look for some buffering in it. They look for different ways to actually move in with some mixed-use development in that area. It used to be 24 units to the acre. It's now 35 units to the acre. It used to have a 1.5 FAR. You now have a 2.0 FAR. The reason I'm going through all of this is, again, to talk about some of the densities and intensities that can exist on the category, out on the corridor, but not specifically drilled down Himes to Del Mabry. It's important to realize that so that you don't have stripped out commercial. There are areas along the corridor that are already set for different types of intensities and densities. So again, continuing on, by the numbers game, 13 is that heavy commercial, 7 the community mixed use 35, 5 is the res 20, again directly to the north and south behind the community mixed use 35. The suburban mixed use 6, you can see only a small area, that 3 that's in there, and now there's a little bit of a larger area. So going on to the next slide lets you see where we have seen some change. The change is primarily, actually not primarily, is pretty much entirely from Himes going to the west, where you see right on the corner there, you see TACPA 1813 to residential 20. What was the impetus for me being up here today? TACPA 2501, the historic from 1999 on the backside, and then also Palmacy is down planning, which is something, just to say down planning is something that is very rare that we have actually had any conversations about that here, certainly as of late, was TPA 2004-13. And again, that was voluntary down planning. So the property owners in that area down planned their property from residential 20 to residential 10. There was then a corresponding rezoning to remove the RM16s and RM18s out of that. So this just zooms in again, showing you where we've had some some land use amendments over time. Also, you'll notice on the north going up Del Mabry, that's actually TACPA 1101, kind of similar to what we're having a conversation about. There was a private applicant that came in with a 1/4 acre piece of property directly abutting Plant High School and wanted residential 20. So at that time, staff said, well, let's look at the whole corridor, all of that Res 6 and all of that Res 10, to look at whether that entire corridor should go to residential 10 or residential 20. Again, with the residential 20 direct, that was not passed. There was no land use changes that occurred on Del Mabry as you see today. It is still that residential 6 as well as a bit of residential 10 in that area. This shows you again in 2004 all of that residential 20 that was directly north and south of the corridor, and it's down planning into the residential 10. little bit further, just to talk about some of the current zonings that we have along the corridor. Again, it's primarily commercial intensive, commercial general in the PDs. The PDs obviously are what we see a lot of the time. If you're not doing the Euclidean zoning that you already have, a lot of the times you are PDing. This area specifically, I guess the CG and the CIs do allow for some uses to come in and out of that area, whether they are dry cleaners or restaurants or florists or whatever that we have along the corridor. And then as you go a little bit further to the west, you have some larger development that has occurred in there, such as where the Starbucks that is in there on the north side. And on the south side, you also have some things where there's some offices that have gone in, as well as some assisted living facilities that have gone in on that area. Also, it's interesting to know on the north side between Sterling and Dale Mabry, there's a lot of large plate institutional uses with some churches that are on there. You'll notice that on residential 20, right at Dale Mabry and Beta Bay, that's actually a parking lot that's there for the church across the street. It's still zone residential single family. So again, even though we may have a block face where we go, there's not a lot of residential on the block face because you have an assisted living facility. You have the parking lot for the church. You have a office that's there, and then you have a single family home. But what you still have are some single family residential support uses that are occurring there instead of them intensifying to other non-residential uses. So the non-residential uses that actually showed up on that south side of Beta Bay are actually pretty much the least intensive non-residential uses that you can end up having there. This just shows you some of the historic zonings. Again, the reason we want to show you the back and forth between these two is, again, to show that there hasn't been a lot of change in the zoning in the last 25, 30 years along the corridor. Again, you can see going east to west, the CIs, CGs, and some of the PDs that are along there. You'll also see, again, all of RM18s and RM16s that used to be the Res 20. So this shows you specifically parcel by parcel on some of the zonings. Don't want to go parcel by parcel on the zonings, but this is always interesting to look at because it does give you basically what the building footprint is, which again shows you about the form on the corridor and what we're looking at. So you can see fronting Beta Bay, you still have some small plate development that's there. Small plate, probably single family. They're probably single family homes that have been converted in that CIs and those CGs into other types of uses. What I'm basically wanting to bring that up is because there's not an accumulation of the property where people are losing the smaller structures that are there and building larger office units or building larger types of commercial units. So you see where the market is going there with smaller types of non-residential uses. When you move a little bit further to the west, you do see the plate open up a little bit, and those are primarily some of the churches that you have on the north side. This again just shows that same zoning and rezoning history. All right, and this goes down to those considerations. So again, this is, point counterpoint that we had that we want to give to you guys. So no change, Himes to Dale Mabry. The north face remains completely unchanged. Nothing has happened in that 30-year span that we have, at least with the idea of zonings and land use changes. The south face has seen incremental change, but it's over a 2-decade span. So we haven't seen something that's come out in the last 2, 3, 4 years to hit a 50% change on a block face. And then there's not a strong trend towards other uses via those approvals or the applications. Land use changes. Well, what have we seen? We've seen some suburban mixed use 6. Suburban mixed use 6, the 6 units to the acre on its surface doesn't meet some of the base residential that you have there for the density. SMU 6 does allow for mixed use though, so you can get through it, but on a mixed use pattern. Residential 20 would allow for consideration of non-residential uses, but it does increase density along the corridor. Other land uses. Neighborhood mixed use 16 is something that the future land use section for the city of Tampa is looking at right now to expand to other areas of the city of Tampa. Today, it is a very concentrated area where that you can actually use those neighborhood mixed use. Along with that, then, it's policy change for the zoning district. The neighborhood commercial within those neighborhood mixed uses would then be expanded. The neighborhood commercial district, again, is not as intensive as CG uses, right? but it also allows for a little more commercial flexibility than, say, things like residential office, or the idea of just straight PDs, which again are very restrictive in the way that they are built, developed, and operate over time. You may have to come in and PD the PD. There's also current and proposed future land use section may provide different options based on land use or location. Again, we don't have, what this was created with is our future land use section that we have today. And we know that there is one that's floating out there in the ether that will hopefully be brought to adoption here the first couple of months in 2026. So with that, we just wanted to say that it is recommended that any desired action taken by the Planning Commission shall not commence until the new future land use section for the City of Tampa is effective in 2026. And this will allow for the greater alignment with proposed land use framework. So I thank you for your time. I know that was a little bit longer, and this concludes my presentation.
All right. Thank you, sir. Are there any questions, comments? I figured there would be some from over here, Commissioner Sieben.
Okay, so just a couple. I think I'm the one who put this forward to begin with, but just to clarify, what was the reasoning we want to wait until after February to move this forward?
So currently the City of Tampa's future land use section will be transmitted and hopefully adopted in 2026. And at that time, there may be the ability to have different land uses that today would not be afforded along the Bay to Bay corridor, or different policy that may allow for rezonings to occur without the land use itself. So it's basically, let's see what happens over here, and then we can have a conversation about it, or it's your purview. If you guys want to go forward with something else, you most certainly can.
Are there any proposed future land use changes to this corridor in the comp plan, in the proposed comp plan as it is today?
No, there are not land use changes for the corridor.
Okay.
Can I just add to the answer? I think part of the trick is that, like, if you go out and talk to a landowner about what is allowed and what might be some of the options for a change, those options and the details of those categories is in flux right now. So you tell them, well, Res 20 would allow this today, but in a couple of months it'll allow something different. That's just adding an extra layer of confusion. It'd be more straightforward if we can say this is what council has said Res 20 is going to mean. This is what you can do with your property. But as I think I mentioned in a couple of the briefings, the timing is a little uncertain, even with, I mean, we hope that City Council will take action in February. If they don't, then we might have to look at something else. So there's just a lot in flux, I guess, until that milestone is met.
My desire to push this forward, I think, was because we had, I think, either one or a couple applications come up on Bay to Bay where they didn't quite know what they could do with their land. They weren't successful, I think, putting an office there. And it sounded like those single-family homes, I think it was on the corner of Himes and Bay to Bay, the access feels a little bit dangerous there. So I think just from a safety standpoint, I think eventually it would probably be better for everyone if these were commercial or mixed-use projects as opposed to residential. Whether we take action on it today or I guess in February, I'm not sure matters a whole lot, but honestly, if City Council ends up taking a long time, it might be more beneficial to these landowners for us to take action sooner. So just some thoughts.
All right, good points, Commissioner Sieben. Commissioner Sink.
Quick question regarding legal nonconforming. So I know that sometimes our maps don't necessarily show what's out there. So if something did happen or we had substantial damage, those landowners would not even be able to do what they have today. On a small section like that, is it ever possible to show like what legal nonconforming actually is in that neighborhood? When you're talking about a strip like this, you're talking about how many, maybe 150 parcels, and of those, how many are actually legally nonconforming when it comes to density on top of what's there?
If I'm understanding you correctly, are you talking about what would be considered legal nonconforming south and north for triplexes and quads within the RM16 and RM18s?
Even in regards to like what's on Beta Bay, like some of that street has been developed prior to what our current land use is. So if they got substantially damaged, we'd actually not be able to use that same use, or they're being used for office, and on their map they're showing up as single family. You know what I'm saying?
So I can see part of what may be is you have a Euclidean zoning district for CG or CI. If the structure is destroyed, you are supposed to build back to Euclidean standards. If today your structure is actually sitting in the setback of the CG or the CI, that may be an issue, I believe. But again, I am not a zoning counselor for the city of Tampa, so that's my best guess. There could be some issues such as that.
I don't know that anyone has a complete map of all of the nonconformities, so I think that's certainly something we could delve in more detail on. But looking at the zoning map, I'm not sure they're even reflecting all of what is non-conforming that was built before, like, and maybe it's not conforming to the land use. So yeah, those folks are really
That's what
in a
I'm talking about.
pickle.
Sometimes where the future land use is not consistent even with what's on there.
Right.
And that will give character, like they'll tell you how a neighborhood is functioning sometimes.
A lot of the zoning matches the land use category.
Mhm.
So my thought is that we'd have to delve even deeper because it's not showing up in the zoning. So yeah, I don't know that we have a map of that, I guess is the short answer.
All right, good points. Opening a bit of a Pandora's box for the city of Tampa there, Commissioner Sink, in your first meeting. Watch out now. Commissioner Linkus.
I guess I just want to echo what Commissioner Stevens said. I think that access is such a big issue here. But I guess it does make me feel concerned. I think commercial uses would tend to generate more traffic and more turning movements that may exacerbate the issues that one sees there. So it may be that if it were appropriate to look at this, that needed to be considered as well to some degree. But it sounds like there's been a history, and I really appreciated the presentation. I thought it was really interesting to see the depth of the history there and the continuous kind of trend there of more residential pattern.
Commissioner Sieben.
I just want to speak to that real quick. What I meant to say was, or what my hope would be for this area, I guess, eventually, is if we had more of a mixed-use pattern, that more of these parcels could be aggregated and maybe allow for a better parking scenario than in and out of your driveway, which can be dangerous, especially given the fact that I don't even think there are sidewalks on a large part of that roadway.
All right. Are there any other thoughts or comments? I also want to echo what Commissioner Sieben said. If City Council decides to punt again, then I definitely think we need to have this come forward irrespective of that. We can't always be waiting on the City Council and the politics or whatever they're using to make their motions and movements. We kind of have to look at what's for the community. So I get where we are right now, but come next year, and stay up and just want to go.
And if I could ask for some guidance, Mr. Collins presented, I definitely see that the no change is not the choice of the planning commission, but more of he presented changing the land use category on the future land use map, which is fairly straightforward versus some sort of policy approach that might allow for some greater accommodation of the mix of uses on this corridor, perhaps different than other corridors. Is there any direction on those two choices?
Commissioner Sieben?
My suggestion would be the category, because I think that it is easy to understand for people. And I'm not sure how we have it now, if it's just one parcel in. My thought is maybe it should even be 2 parcels in on the south side, because of the depth of those parcels, maybe even on the north side, but I see that, you know, it depends on where you are on the corridor. But if we had 2 parcels in on the south side, you would probably have a better opportunity to modify this area into something more sustainable.
Yeah, our study area went 2 parcels on both sides, but you're right, on the north side of the road where it's showing in this map, that goes into the residential 6, which is a much lower density and more established single-family homes than perhaps on the south side.
I just echo Commissioner Siebent's sentiments again. I think land use is better, especially when obviously the city council is the final decision maker, and getting into the nitty gritty of policy can start to get contentious and argumentative. So if we keep it clean and keep it land use, you know, I think that'd be best. Any other thoughts? I see a lot of nodding. All right. Any other comments, discussions in this one from the commissioners? Not seeing Commissioner.
I mean, do you need anything from us formally?
No, I think we got what we needed. Thank you.
All right. Any other thoughts or comments, questions? Not seeing any. Well, thank you for the information, Mr. Collins, and we will move on to our next agenda item. Where are we at here? 4C, HCCPA 25-01, Comprehensive Plan Map Amendment 2002, West Highway 60, and the presenter is Tyreek Royal.
Good afternoon, everyone. Tyreek Royal, Planning Commission staff, and today I'll be presenting HCCPA 2501 at 2002, West Highway 60. This request is privately initiated small-scale map amendment with approximately 9.5 acres. The request is to change the land use designation from Residential 1 to SMU 6. The location of the site is in the eastern portion of unincorporated Hillsborough County. This is a part of the October 2025 cycle in the rural area, wellhead protection area, and not located within the limits of a community plan. This is an area of the photo outlined here in pink. You may recognize this site. It came before you previously as an OC20 request. The Board of County Commissioners directed it to come back to the Planning Commission for review under the SMU 6 category. It is located north of State Road 60 and south of Mud Lake Road. Surrounding uses include agriculture uses to the west and south, single-family uses to the north, and light commercial uses to the east. The site is currently in the Residential 1 future land use category. It allows for the consideration of agricultural, farms, ranches, residential, neighborhood commercial, offices, and multi-purpose projects. Commercial uses are subject to locational criteria. The site is approximately 1.7 miles from the urban service area, and the public quasi-public area is Medard Park. The applicant is requesting to change the future land use category from Residential 1 to SMU 6 as directed by the BOCC. The SMU 6 allows for agricultural, residential, neighborhood commercial, office uses, research corporate park, light industrial, multi-purpose, and clustered residential and or mixed uses. Office uses are not subject to locational criteria. The change from Residential 1 to SMU 6 would allow for an increase in development by allowing significantly higher residential density and greater commercial intensity. The density of one dwelling unit per gross acre will increase to 6 dwelling units per gross acre. The commercial intensity will increase from a 0.25 FAR, or approximately 103,000 square feet, to a 0.5 FAR, or approximately 206,000 square feet. And that concludes my briefing. I'm here for any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions, comments from the commissioners? I had a quick one. You said what did this go forward as before it got kicked back?
It was office commercial.
Office commercial. Okay, I think I remember this when it was read. And the Board of County Commissioners, in agreement with the property owner, decided to bring it back through us again as SMU 6.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Be interested to see what staff comes up with on this one. So, are there any questions, comments from the commissioners on this one? Not seeing any. Well, thank you. We will move on to our next agenda item. Item 4D, HCCPA 25-26, Comprehensive Plan Text Amendment, South Hillsborough County Plan Text Amendment, and the presenter is Victoria Durand.
Good afternoon, Planning Commission. Victoria Duran, Planning Commission staff. Today I will be presenting HCCPA 2526, a text amendment to the South Hillsborough County Plan, currently known as the South Shore Area-Wide Systems Plan. So for some background information, the South Shore Area-Wide Systems Plan was originally adopted in September 2003 and then later updated in September 2015. It was established to guide coordinated growth and development in South Hillsborough County by addressing transportation needs, environmental protection, cultural and historic preservation, and economic development. This text amendment is a publicly initiated amendment directed by the Board of County Commissioners earlier this year on July 22nd to rename the South Shore Area-Wide Systems Plan to the South Hillsborough County Plan within the Livable Communities element of the comprehensive plan. And the map that you see on the right shows the South Shore Area-Wide Systems Plan boundary highlighted in blue. The plan also incorporates several community plans within it, which I will name them in the next slide. As a part of this text amendment, all sections and elements referencing community plans within the comprehensive plan were reviewed, and effective policy was only found within the Livable Communities element. Accordingly, the South Shore Area-Wide Systems Plan, the Ruskin Community Plan, the Riverview Community Plan, the Apollo Beach Community Plan, and the Gibsonton Community Plan will be updated to reflect the new name and maintain alignment throughout the comprehensive plan. Also, the proposed name change will not affect the intent of policy. And this concludes my presentation. Thank you. I'm available for any questions.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions, comments from the commissioners on this one? Not seeing any. We'll thank you for the information. Move on to our next agenda item, 4E, HCCPA 25-27, Comprehensive Plan Map Amendment 5008 through 5044, Saffold Road, Urban Service Area Expansion, and the presenter is Lillian Lenahan.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Lillian Lenahan, Planning Commission staff, here to present HCCPA 2527, located at Saffold Road. This is a publicly initiated map amendment that is small in scale and approximately 19.94 acres. It is a request to expand the urban service area, and there's an amendment associated with, or it's associated with HCCPA 2528, which is a request to change the future land use category from agricultural rural 1 to 5 to residential 4. This is the general location map. As I mentioned in the last slide, it is associated with HCCPA 2528. It is in the rural area and within the limits of the South Shore Area-Wide Systems Plan and Waimama Village Plan, and it is located north of Saffold Road and west of County Road 579. Here's an aerial of the site. The site is outlined in pink, and the blue line indicates the existing urban service area boundary. And I do want to point out on this map that the two parcels adjacent to the subject site on the west, you saw in a previous cycle, they have privately initiated comprehensive plan map amendments. They were application HCCPA 2519 and 2520, and those were to expand the urban service area and change the existing future land use to residential 4. And the existing urban service area was a previously publicly initiated map amendment that changed all the WVR2 and expanded it into the urban service area and also changed it to the residential 4. The reason you see the maps not having those two adjacent parcels is because those previous cycles, 2519, 2520, are not yet fully approved and effective, so you won't see them on these briefing maps, but I do want to make you aware that those are in process. So the proposed amendment would bring approximately 19.94 acres into the urban service area and require at minimum connection to public water and sewer. And this amendment, while a part of the October 2025 cycle, is scheduled to be heard at the February Planning Commission public hearing. This concludes my presentation for HCCPA 2527. I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you very much. Are there any questions from the commissioners? Not seeing any. We'll move right along then into HCCPA 25-28 Comprehensive Plan Map Amendment 5008 through 5044 Saffold Road, and the presenter is again Lillian Lenahan.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Lillian Lenahan, Planning Commission staff. I'm here to present HCCPA 2528, located at Saffold Road. Again, this is a publicly initiated map amendment that is small in scale and approximately 19.94 acres. And the request is to change the future land use designation from agricultural rural 1 to 5 to residential 4. Again, this is the general location map. It's associated with HCCPA 2527. It's in the rural area and within the limits of South Shore Area-Wide Systems Plan and the Waimama Village Plan, and is located north of Saffold Road and west of County Road 579. Again, here's the aerial of the site with the site outlined in pink and the blue line indicating the urban service area boundary. The site currently has single-family uses on the property. There's agricultural uses to the northwest and further southeast, and single-family uses are to the northeast and west of the site, and there are a few public, quasi-public institutional uses to the south and the east. Again, this map, as I previously discussed, does not show that the other two amendments are currently under review for the residential 4 designation. Currently, the future land use designation is in Agricultural Rule 1 to 5. The Agricultural Rule 1 to 5 category allows 1 dwelling unit per 5 gross acres and a maximum floor area ratio of 0.25. And this designation allows for the consideration of farms, ranches, feedlots, residential, neighborhood, commercial, offices, industrial uses related to agricultural uses, and mining-related activities. Other future land use categories shown in this map include natural preservation and residential 4. The applicant is proposing to amend the future land use category to residential 4. The residential 4 category allows for 4 dwelling units per gross acre and a maximum floor area ratio of 0.25. This designation allows for the consideration of agricultural, residential, neighborhood, commercial, office uses, and multi-purpose projects. Under existing conditions, currently under the agricultural residential 1 to 5, the site could consider 3 dwelling units or a maximum of 217,146 square feet of non-residential uses. And under the proposed future land use destination of residential 4, the site could be considered for 79 dwelling units or a maximum of 217,146 square feet. And during the rezoning process, commercial locational criteria may affect the allowable square footage for potential non-residential development. In conclusion, the proposed amendment would allow for the consideration of increased residential density and will not increase the potential of a commercial intensity. Just like with CPA 2527, this amendment, while a part of the October 2025 cycle, is scheduled to be heard during the February Planning Commission public hearing. This concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions, comments from the commissioners? Oop. Ms. Zornita, I almost called you Commissioner Zornita. Ms. Zornita.
No. I just wanted to mention that, as Lily mentioned, because of the volume of amendments that would normally be scheduled for your January hearing, we are deferring all of the ones that are publicly initiated to February. We can do that because we didn't get in too many for the city of Tampa, who has their public hearing February, so we can add on to that. But we're trying to balance out sort of the length of the hearing next month. So.
All right, thank you very much. Not seeing any action. Well, thank you for the information. And we will move on to our next agenda item, 4G, HCCPA 25-29, Comprehensive Plan Text Amendment, Rural Light Industrial Future Land Use Category Text Amendment. And the presenter is Melissa Leinhardt.
Thank you, Chair Joseph. Let me get this up here. My name is Melissa Leinhardt. I'm part of your Planning Commission staff, and I'm here today to present to you HCCPA 25-29. So a little background about this plan amendment. There has been a trend of plan amendments to a couple categories, namely the Suburban Mixed Use 6 category and the Office Commercial 20 category in the rural area over the last few years. There's also been several amendments to the light industrial future land use category, as well as the light industrial planned, or we call it LIP category. While those particularly didn't increase or would not increase density in the rural area, they do have a very urban scale development pattern associated with them, as well as floor area ratio. So overall, these categories would allow a density and or intensity that's not supported by adopted policy direction. Some of the policies identified in past staff reports include our rural area policies about minimizing density increases in the rural area, transition of use policies, policies about compatibility, and as well as conflicts with community plan visions. Based upon this development trend and these requests, at their August 14th meeting of this year, the Board of County Commissioners did direct Planning Commission staff to create a new rural future land use category that would allow for consideration of uses that are more intensive than neighborhood serving uses, which are the uses that you would find in more of the commercial neighborhood and commercial general zoning districts, but not as intensive as more heavy industrial uses. So this would be a category to try to meet the needs of what we're seeing from a plan amendment application perspective, while also trying to balance the policies that we have in the comprehensive plan today. So this is a publicly initiated plan amendment. It's part of the October cycle. This is a text amendment to the future land use section of the comprehensive plan that would add a new comprehensive plan map category, and we're calling it rural light industrial. We're also proposing to add a definition of limited light industrial uses to the definition section of the comprehensive plan. As far as the impacts are concerned, I mean, there is nothing to compare it to today because it doesn't exist. So what we're proposing as part of this new category to address this kind of unfulfilled need that we're seeing is a 0.25 floor area ratio or 175,000 square feet of non-resident, or I'm sorry, of commercial intensive uses, whichever is less intense. There would also be no residential development associated with this category, and that would be similar to the light industrial categories that we have: heavy industrial, light industrial planned, and research and corporate park. Those only allow very limited residential, as in an on-site security guard. We're also, again, introducing a new definition of limited light industrial uses, and the definition that we have that you see on the screen is uses that are compatible with the rural residential development pattern and do not produce significant noise, odor, smoke, or vibration. Examples of this include small-scale manufacturing, fabrication, and assembly of refined products, as well as warehousing and wholesale operations. And again, in order to address the fact that this would only be allowed in the rural area and to address potential compatibility conflicts, we would recommend that a planned development rezoning be associated with this and be required in this category. If anyone has any questions, I am here. That completes my presentation, but like Ms. Zornita said, this is publicly initiated, so you would all see this at the February Planning Commission instead of the January.
All right, are there any questions, comments from the planning commissioners on this one? My only comment, I'll echo what I said in my briefing. I think some clarity on the term significant. You know me, I get to be a stickler for words when we get to this level. Significant noise, odor, and those sorts of things, you know, whether we define them, whether they point to something in the land development code or wherever it is, you know, again, my idea is that I don't want our agency to be in the way of these things. The Board of County Commissioners wants this. It's something that the community has been wanting by, you know, you can tell by the application. So I don't want future agency people to be standing in the way of things. If the clearer we can make it in the writing so that it's just, you know, administrative and moves right through, the better. So let's make sure things are clear.
Sure, good comment. And I also will add that as part of the consistency review, I will include our research. So there will be a data point to talk about how many plan amendments we've seen to sort of address this trend. I'm just telling you there's a trend, but I'm going to show you there's a trend.
All right, thank you very much. Oh, Commissioner Bowden.
Yeah, I know you said that you will define some businesses or types that would like to fit. Have you, that initial thought, is it anything that you thought of already, you guys have thought about already?
So with the trend that we have seen, most of the zonings that we've seen either after or have been running concurrently with the plan amendment, I mean, frankly, they've mostly been to open storage uses, which is not something that would be associated with an FAR, a floor area ratio, which is why one of the reasons we were comfortable with choosing 0.25, which is akin to what you would see in the more of the residential categories in the rural area. But that is the use that we have seen kind of play out as part of this. But we have seen some mini warehouse, some other types of warehousing associated with these types of rezonings as well.
Okay. Something you may consider, God, I just lost my train of thought. It'll come back to me. But thank you very much.
All right. Any other, Commissioner Linkus?
I guess I may have missed some of the details here, but I guess if some of this is about open storage and then maybe trucks parking overnight is a lot of what I think we're seeing, I guess, you know, one of the things I'd be interested in is just thinking about where that would not be compatible with agricultural uses, like maybe like equestrian kind of operations or where animals are or where people, I'm not quite sure exactly what that would be, but if there could be some kind of thoughtfulness around kind of where specifically this may not be appropriate, that might be useful for us.
Okay, great question, or great comment.
All right. Any other comments? I did want to say also that the PD I thought was smart in there. I don't think I mentioned that in my briefing, but I like the PD sort of thing. It puts the final decision on the final decision makers as it should be. So I think that's a good thing. Any other thoughts or comments? Not seeing any. Well, thank you for the information.
Thank you.
And we'll move on to our next agenda item. 4H, HCCPA 25-30 Comprehensive Plan Map Amendment, south side of 11th Avenue Southeast and east of 27th Street Southeast. And the presenter is David Hay.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. David Hay with your Planning Commission staff. Again, this is a briefing for HCCPA 25-30. It is located down in Ruskin, the south side of 11th Avenue Southeast and east of 27th Street Southeast. It is a privately initiated small-scale amendment. It's approximately 4.7 acres. Currently, the subject site has an adopted future land use of SMU 6, and the applicant is seeking to go to the Office Commercial 20 future land use category. The subject site is located down here in Ruskin. It's within the urban service area. It's within the community plan boundary for Ruskin, but also within the boundaries of South Shore Area-Wide Systems Plan. Here we have an aerial of the subject site. You could see the subject site outlined in yellow. The main access way into the site is from 11th Avenue Southeast. This is College Avenue to the north. We have Interstate 75 over here to the east. The predominant development pattern, there's a lot going on in this particular area. Down 11th Avenue, this is predominantly mobile homes. There are some non-conforming, from what we can tell, non-conforming commercial uses occurring on AS1 property to the north here. This is the new Moffett South Shore campus building right here at the corner of 27th Street Southeast and East College Avenue. There is some approved commercial. There's approved multifamily, unbuilt, over on 33rd Avenue near the interchange. There is a health facility to the south, down here on 14th Avenue Southeast. There are also some mobile homes parks within this area down here. And then to the west, we have predominantly single-family detached, except for from what we can tell, a non-conforming auto repair use on an AS1 property as well to the west. Here we have the adopted future land use map. You can see the subject site, and all this kind of in the light pink is that suburban mixed use 6. It does get more intensive, at least the plan recognizes it as more intensive to the east near the interchange. That's that community mixed use 12. You do have residential 4 south of 14th Avenue southeast. And there is some residential 1 hard to see south of 75 down here. And this is the urban service boundary, and this area here is within the rural area. This is all within the urban. Here's the adopted future land use map if it's changed to that Office Commercial 20. Again, I'm going to note this street is unimproved. So there is right-of-way there, but there's no road there. The only access is from this direction. Currently, under the SMU 6, 28 dwelling units could be considered on site, or a maximum of 102,000 square feet. Under the proposed Office Commercial 20, that does go up to a potential maximum of 94 dwelling units, or a potential non-residential maximum of 153,000, approximately 153,000 square feet. So it would increase the non-residential square footage. It does, though, eliminate the use for light industrial uses on that site. Overall, the residential density would also increase. That concludes my briefing. I'm available if you have any questions. We'll be back in January with this one.
All right. Any questions, comments? Commissioner Sink.
So just so I understand correctly, Moffett is actually conforming in a suburban mixed use. What it's built there is actually has accomplished that. Okay.
Yes, it was I believe a PD.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Ms. Sornita?
Thank you. I think that is one important thing to mention, that changes with the land use category change is that under the suburban mixed use 6 area, under the office commercial 20, there is no requirement for a PD zoning like that. So that's a component of this change.
Commissioner Sank?
Has there been any feedback from anyone around the area about it? Has anybody wrote letters, called in?
When I was out at the site, a man did approach me and was asking what I was doing out there, because it is at the end of a dead-end road, so I think they were like, why is this man out there taking all these pictures? So I told him what the potential was for the site under the office commercial 20. He said he lives to the north. I was assuming because he came from where that auto body facility is that seems non-conforming. He was coming from that direction, and he said he didn't have a problem with it. So that was the only feedback I've gotten. I don't think, and I can double check in the record, I haven't seen any come through like citizens writing in or anything yet.
Ms. Sornita?
I would just point out that the signs will go up probably in the next week or so, so that sometimes generates feedback.
All right, are there any other questions, comments, discussion items from the commissioners? Not seeing any. Well, thank you, Mr. Hay.
Thank you.
Move on to our next agenda item, 4I, HCCPA 25-31, Comprehensive Plan Map Amendment 12780, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard, and 2922 Shady Acres Road, and the presenter is Tyreek Royal.
Good afternoon, everyone. Tyreek Royal, Planning Commission staff, and today I'll be presenting HCCPA 2531 at 12780 Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard and 2922 Shady Acres Road. This request is privately initiated, small-scale map amendment with approximately 4.45 acres. The request has changed the land use designation from residential 1 to light industrial. The location of the site is in the eastern portion of unincorporated Hillsborough County. It is a part of the October 2025 cycle in the rural area and within the limits of the Sefner Mango Community Plan. This is an area of the site outlined here in pink. It's located north of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard. The surrounding uses include single-family uses to the south and east, light industrial uses further east along MLK, and public communications directly to the west of the site. The site is in the residential 1 future land use category. It allows for the consideration of agricultural, farms, ranches, residential, neighborhood commercial, offices, and multi-purpose projects, and commercial uses are subject to locational criteria. The applicant is requesting to change the future land use category from residential 1 to light industrial. The light industrial allows for consideration for agricultural, light industrial uses such as processing, manufacturing, recycling, and storage of materials as the predominant use, including support offices, warehousing, and retail uses. The proposed amendment will eliminate any potential residential density and allow higher commercial intensity. The density of one dwelling unit per gross acre would be eliminated, and the commercial intensity will increase from a 0.25 FAR, or approximately 48,000 square feet, to a 0.75 FAR, or approximately 145,000 square feet. And that concludes my briefing at this time, and I'm here for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any comments or questions on this one from the commissioners? Commissioner Kugler?
Yes, just one question about the, I didn't see any photos, I don't think you had them, but just south of the proposed light industrial development, is that housing frontage on the main road? Is that MLK, I think?
Let me check. Yeah, so the residential is, I'm sorry, that is wrong.
So just south of the pink area between that and Martin Luther King, are those
Yeah, so
condos? Or?
The surrounding uses include single-family uses to the south and east, yes, sir.
Single-family use?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Ms. Sornita?
We can, are you referring to that little strip between the property and the roadway?
So this is FDOT right away, directly side. I'm sorry, yeah, I misunderstood. Yes, yes, yes. And I did confirm that FDOT will allow access to the site for Martin Luther King.
All right, Commissioner Bowden?
Yeah, I just remembered what I was going to, the particular use, if I can interject that as well.
Ms. Sornita will take it.
Yeah, I was thinking about
Oh, she's still here. Ms.
a
Lyon.
flex use, flex storage, yeah.
All right. All right. Are there any on this item questions, comments, or discussion? Commissioner Jemison? No?
Yeah, it does, I'm looking at the maps, and it does look like there's light industrial to the west, not very far from this site, going back on MLK to the west.
There's light industrial to the site, it looks like. There's U-Haul storage and truck storage.
Okay. All right. Any other comments or questions from the commissioners? Not seeing any. Now, thank you for the information. To our next agenda item, HTA 2532 Comprehensive Plan Map Amendment 5302 Turkey Creek Road, and the presenter is Tyreek Royal.
All right, Tyreek Royal again, Planning Commission staff, and I'll be presenting HCCPA 2532 at 530 Turkey Creek Road. The request is also privately initiated small-scale map amendment with approximately 6.38 acres. The request is to change the land use designation from residential 1 to light industrial. The location of the site is in the eastern portion of unincorporated Hillsborough County. It is a part of the October 25 cycle in the rural area and not within the limits of a community plan. Here's the area of the site outlined in pink. It is located north of State Road 60. The surrounding land uses include single-family uses to the north and east, public quasi-public uses to the west, and heavy commercial uses to the south across State Road 60. The site is in the residential 1 future land use category, which allows for the consideration of agricultural, farms, ranches, residential, neighborhood commercial, office uses, multi-purpose projects. Commercial uses are subject to locational criteria. The applicant is requesting to change the future land use category from residential 1 to light industrial. The light industrial allows for consideration for agricultural, light industrial uses such as processing, manufacturing, recycling, storage of materials as a predominant use, including support offices, warehousing, and retail uses. The proposed amendment would eliminate any potential residential density and allow for higher commercial intensity. The density of 1 dwelling unit per gross acre would be eliminated, and the commercial intensity will increase from a 0.25 FAR, or approximately 69,000 square feet, to a 0.75 FAR, or approximately 208,000 square feet. I did get correspondence from the applicant today that they will be requesting a continuance to see how the new future land use category of the rural industrial future land category looks to January. That concludes my presentation. I'm here for any questions.
All right. Thank you very much. Were there any questions discussed on this one? Not seeing a lot of motion, and we'll thank you for the information. Move on to our next agenda item, which is 4K HCCPA 25-33 Comprehensive Plan Map Amendment, College Avenue and 18th Street Southeast, and the presenter is Will.
Presentation that the applicant recently decided to change their request. So the updated briefing packets were sent out to you on Friday. The requested change was originally SMU 6 to CMU 12, and the request is now from SMU 6 to Res 12, as I'll get into our presentation. This presentation and any material moving forward will reflect this change. This request is a privately initiated small-scale map amendment. It is made up of 2 parcels that total approximately 19.53 acres. The request is to change the land use designation of these parcels from suburban mixed-use 6 to residential 12. This plan amendment is part of the October 2025 cycle, located in the urban service area, and is within the limits of the Ruskin Community Plan and the South Shore Area-Wide Systems Plan. Here's an aerial photo of the site outlined in pink. It is located north of East College Avenue, west of 21st Street Southeast, and south of East Shell Point Road. Within the vicinity of the site, single-family residential uses are located to the northwest and east. There are 2 family uses also with heavy commercial uses. The site is in the SMU 6 future land use category. This category allows for the consideration of agricultural, residential, neighborhood commercial, office uses, research corporate park uses, light industrial multipurpose, and clustered residential and/or mixed use. Office uses are not subject to locational criteria. Surrounding land use categories include SMU 6 on all sides of the property. To the northwest of the site, there is residential 6, and further south across College Avenue East, there is residential 4. Not seen on this particular map, but there is also residential 12 approximately 1 mile west of the site. The request is to change the site to residential 12, which allows for the consideration of uses such as agricultural, residential, neighborhood commercial, office uses, multipurpose projects, and mixed-use development. This slide outlines the potential impacts of the requested land use change. Currently under SMU 6, the site can be considered for up to 107 and 425 363 square feet of non-residential. The change to residential 12 would allow for the consideration of 234 dwelling units and 363,000 square feet of non-residential residential uses. The proposed amendment would increase development potential by allowing consideration of higher residential density. That concludes my presentation. I'm here for any questions.
Thank you. Over there, Commissioner Kugler.
Thank you. I saw in your map legend a coastal high hazard, but it wasn't on the map. It's outside the coastal high hazard, isn't it?
The coastal high hazard is just like that on the very, very left, that little green. So the site is not in the coastal high hazard, but it is on the map there on the left.
On the left side of your map, the little green squiggly line
Yes,
there?
exactly.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. I just had a comment. This one's right down the street from the one Mr. Hay presented earlier. There seems to be a lot going on in that area, as Commissioner Sink was querying, with the hospital and everything down there, that campus. When this comes back, I'd like some information on College Avenue, the street itself, where it's at in our corridor plan, if there's any thought to, development there, how many lanes, is there public transit, that sort of thing. So I'm just wondering about the corridor there. I know it connects into the highway at the end of it, so it seems like something we should be looking at in that area. So,
Okay, thank you for the note.
Commissioner Singh.
It feels very Big Bendy to me, like where we started with Big Ben 15 years ago and where we are today. It's kind of how I keep looking at it.
All right. Commissioner Kugler, was that a comment or just a light on? Nope. All right. Any other comments, questions from the commissioners? Commissioner Bowden.
Well, actually, I live in that area, and you're absolutely correct. That area is Shell Point. There's a lot of construction, a lot of development, everything from, housing, commercial, because, there's a new Walmart, Publix is popping up every place. So, yeah, it is, it's going to be big.
All right. Thank you, Commissioner Bowden. Are there any other questions, comments from the commissioners? Not seeing any. We'll thank you for the information. Look forward to it coming back, and we will move on to our next agenda item, 4L, HCCPA 25-34 Comprehensive Plan Map Amendment, 8400 West Waters Avenue, and the presenter is again Willow Mickey.
Good afternoon, Willow Mickey with your Planning Commission staff. I will be briefing HCCPA 25-34, which is located at 8400 West Waters Avenue. This request is a privately initiated small-scale map amendment. It is made up of a portion of one parcel that totals approximately 41.92 acres. The request is to change the land use designation on these parcels from residential 9 to residential 16. This plan amendment is part of the October 2025 cycle located in the urban service area and is within the limits of the Town and Country Community Plan. Here's an aerial photo of the site outlined in pink. It is located north of West Waters Avenue, west of Pinehurst Drive, and east of Sheldon Road. Within the vicinity of the site, there are single-family uses surrounding the site on all sides. To the east, there is a multifamily use and some light commercial uses. Also to the east is the Upper Tampa Bay watershed. I also just wanted to give some context to the request. This is a request to conform the existing development to the modern comprehensive plan and land development code, and it's to ensure that the current occupants are not displaced. The use on the site has historically been mobile park units and assisted living facility. Currently, the ALF portion is no longer operating. The balance of the multi-unit and single-unit mobile homes on the property continue to be occupied on a unit rental or lot rental basis. Discontinuation of the ALF use causes the density of the development to exceed the Res 9 future land use designation. And so that's why they are asking for this. And just to note, the original request included areas to the west of the site that are within the coastal high hazard area, and after discussion with the applicant, they removed those areas. Residential 9 allows for the consideration of agricultural, residential, neighborhood commercial, office uses, multi-purpose projects, and mixed-use development. Surrounding land use categories include residential 6 to the north, residential 9 to the east and west, with residential 12 further west of the Res 9. To the south, there's residential 4 and residential 2. The request is to change the site to residential 16, which allows for the consideration of uses such as agricultural, residential, neighborhood commercial, office uses, multi-purpose projects, and mixed-use development. This slide outlines the potential impacts of the requested land use change. Currently under Res 9, the site can be considered for up to 377 dwelling units and 913,017 square feet of non-residential. The change to Residential 16 would allow for the consideration of 670 dwelling units and 913,017 square feet of non-residential uses. The proposed amendment will result in a potential increase in development potential by allowing consideration of a higher residential density. That concludes this presentation on this item. I'm here to answer any questions.
All right. Are there any questions on this one? I had a quick one. Let's see if I understand this right. So it's going from Res 9 to Res 16 to protect the people in the mobile homes there.
Yes, because with the ALF being not a use anymore, they do not comply with the Res 9 category. So they're above because those units were counted for something different.
Okay.
So now they're above.
And it's one property owner,
I believe so.
privately initiated?
This is a privately initiated.
All right.
I don't know if it's one property owner, though.
Okay. Are there any questions, comments from the commissioners on this one? Any others? Not seeing any. Then we'll, Commissioner Bowden.
Well, understanding the ALF, so I'm just thinking that they probably were counting the number of beds as because it, let's say it was 200 beds, then it's similar to being 200 dwellings. So I understand that. Okay, I don't know if you even know that answer to that question.
Well,
okay, thanks. No, I'm just thinking about
Yeah.
what happens to since it's not functioning now, what happens to that? Is that going to be a redevelopment? But that's a different question.
Yeah.
Yeah, an assisted living facility has a conversion factor where each one, 5 beds equals 1 dwelling unit.
Yes.
So when they take that away and let's say convert it to some other type of residential use, then they've lost a bunch of, like if each of those beds is like now an apartment,
Right.
like they're now exceeding,
Right.
yeah.
All right. Are there any other questions, comments from the commissioners? All right. Well, thank you for the information, and we will move on to our next agenda item. 4M, HCCPA 25-35, Comprehensive Plan Map Amendment 6210, County Road 579, Urban Service Area Expansion, and the presenter is Alexis Myers.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Alexis Myers, Planning Commission staff. I'm here to present HCCPA 2535, located at 6210 County Road 579 for the Urban Service Area Expansion. This is a privately initiated map amendment that is small in scale and approximately 34 acres. The applicant is requesting to expand the urban service area. This amendment is associated with HCCPA 2536, which is a request to change the future land use category from residential 4 to suburban mixed use 6. This is the general location map. As I mentioned, this amendment is associated with HCCPA 2536. It is in the rural area and within the limits of the Tonota-Sassa Community Plan. It is located north of East Sly Avenue and west of County Road 579. Here is the area of the site. The site is outlined in pink, and the blue line indicates the urban service area boundary. The subject property is the Lazy Days RVs of Tampa. The site has wetlands and is in the evacuation zone E and FEMA flood zone X. There is a mobile home park and agriculture to the west. Single-family uses are to the north and west. The Hillsborough Heights landfill is directly east across County Road 579. Industrial uses are to the north. Lastly, there are commercial uses to the north and south, just within the urban service area. Next are the impacts. This amendment would bring 34 acres into the urban service area, requiring at a minimum connection to public water and sewer. And this concludes my presentation for HCCPA 2535. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions, comments from the commissioners on this one? All right, Commissioner Kugler.
This is just a way to inform me, but we have small scale requests, middle scale and large scale. Is it 100 acres, 500, and 1,000 or something like that? Because I've seen a lot today where they varied a lot in size, but they were all considered small scale.
I believe if it's under 100, then it's considered small scale, but if it's over, then it'll be large.
Okay, so it's two sizes of coffee.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, and actually, I think the threshold in state statute is 50 acres for the small scale. So, yeah, they increased that recently, a couple of years ago. Yeah.
All right. Were there any other comments or questions from the commissioners? Seeing any, we'll thank you and move on to our next agenda item, which is yours again. Item 4N, HCCPA 25-36, Comprehensive Plan Map Amendment, 6210 County Road 579, and presenter is Alexis Myers.
Yes, good afternoon again, Commissioners. Alexis Myers, here to present HCCPA 2536, located at 6210 County Road 579. This is a privately initiated map amendment that is small in scale and approximately 34 acres. The applicant is requesting to change the future land use designation from residential 4 to suburban mixed use 6. This is the general location map again. This amendment is associated with HCCPA 2535 to expand the urban service area. It is within the rural area and within the limits of the Tonawanda Community Plan. It is located north of East Sly Avenue and west of County Road 579. Here is the area of the site. The site is outlined in pink, and the blue line indicates the urban service area boundary. Currently, the future land use designation is residential 4. The Res 4 category allows 4 dwelling units per gross acre and a maximum floor area ratio of 0.25. This designation allows for the consideration of agricultural, residential, neighborhood commercial, office uses, and multi-purpose projects. Other future land use categories shown in this map include suburban mixed use 6 and community mixed use 12 to the south, public, quasi-public to the east, and residential 1 to the west. The applicant is proposing to amend the future land use category to suburban mixed use 6. The suburban mixed use 6 category allows 6 dwelling units per gross acre and a maximum floor area ratio of 0.25. This designation allows for the consideration of agricultural, residential, neighborhood commercial, office uses, research corporate uses, light industrial, multi-purpose, and clustered residential and mixed-use projects. Office uses are not subject to locational criteria. Next are the impacts. As far as existing conditions, currently under Res 4, the site could consider 136 dwelling units or 370,281 square feet of non-residential uses. Under the proposed future land use designation of SMU 6, the site could consider 204 dwelling units or a maximum intensity of 740,563 square feet of non-residential uses. During the rezoning process, commercial locational criteria may affect the allowable square footage for potential non-residential development. The proposed amendment will result in an increase in development potential by allowing higher residential and greater commercial intensity. And this concludes my presentation for HCCPA 2536. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions, comments from the commissioners on this one? Not seeing anyone moving. Well, thank you for the information, and we will move on to our next agenda item, 4O, HCCPA 25-37, Comprehensive Plan Map Amendment, 40 Ranch Road, and the presenter is Jillian Massey.
Good afternoon, Jillian Massey. With Planning Commission staff, I'll be presenting a summary of HCCPA 25-37 located at 40 Ranch Road. This request is a privately initiated large-scale map amendment, meaning it's over 50 acres in size, at a site located at approximately 7,944 acres. The request is to change the land use category from agricultural mining 1 to 20, agricultural 1 to 10, agricultural rural 1 to 5, and natural preservation to planned environmental community 1 to 2. The subject site is in the northeast part of unincorporated county, abutting the Pasco County border. It's part of the October 2025 cycle of plan amendment requests, located in the rural area, and it is not within the limits of a community plan. This is an aerial photo of the site outlined in pink. Generally, it's bound by the Pasco County border to the north, Paul Bookman Highway to the east, Quail Meadow Road to the south, and U.S. Highway 301 to the west. Across 301 to the west is the Hillsborough River State Park, and further northwest, where you see the blue dotted line, is the Tampa service area. Currently, the site is undeveloped and contains a large area of environmentally sensitive land. Within the vicinity of the site, there is natural, undeveloped land, agricultural uses, and single-family residential. The site is comprised of agricultural mining 1 to 20, agricultural 1 to 10, agricultural rural 1 to 5, and natural preservation land use categories. Aside from natural preservation where no development is permitted, the other categories generally allow for mining and related activities, farms, ranches, feedlots, low-density residential, neighborhood commercial, offices, and industrial uses related to agricultural uses. The site is surrounded by other rural land use categories, including agricultural state 1 to 2.5 and residential 1. Planned environmental community 1 to 2 is located to the west across US Highway 301 and contains the Two Rivers development. Other non-residential land use categories that are within the vicinity include natural preservation to the east and west, and heavy industrial to the northeast across Paul Buckman Highway. The request is to change the site to planned environmental community 1 to 2, which allows for consideration of uses such as agriculture, residential, neighborhood commercial, office uses, activity-based recreation, and mixed-use projects. Mining, feedlots, and industrial uses are prohibited in this category. Residential development can be considered at a density of up to 1 dwelling unit per 2 gross acres, and non-residential development can be considered at an intensity of up to 0.25 floor area ratio, both subject to a variety of environmentally sensitive design criteria being met. And this category also requires a connection to water and wastewater utility services. This slide outlines the potential impacts of the requested land use change. Currently, the site can be considered for up to 704 dwelling units, or approximately 86.4 million square feet of non-residential development. The change to planned environmental community 1 to 2 would allow for the consideration of up to 3,972 dwelling units, or approximately 86.5 million square feet of non-residential development, meaning overall the proposed amendment would allow for an increase in the potential residential density and commercial intensity. That concludes my presentation. This item will be back at your February Planning Commission public hearing. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Are there any questions or comments from the planning commissioners? I will say, Ms. Corbett, I think I see why you came here today. It's that little natural preservation bit, huh? Yeah. All right, I have no questions or comments, so no one else does. Well, thank you for the information, and we will move on to our next agenda item, which is item 4P, HCCPA 25-38, Comprehensive Plan Map Amendment, 11017 East 92 Highway, and presenter is Lillian Linehan.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Lillian Linehan, Planning Commission staff. I'm here to present HCCPA 2538, which is located at 11017 East 92 Highway. This is a privately initiated map amendment that is small in scale and approximately 4.36 acres. The applicant is requesting to change the future land use from residential 9 to suburban mixed use 6. This is the general location map. It is in the urban service area and within the limits of the Sefner Mango Community Plan. It is located south of East US Highway 92, east of Williams Road, and west of East Mobley Villa Drive. Here is an aerial of the site. The site is outlined in pink. The site currently has a mobile home park, and there are light commercial uses to the north, east, and west of the site, with some heavy commercial to the west. There are single-family uses to the east, west, and south of the site, and there's public, quasi-public institutional uses to the north, and one educational use to the east. Currently, the future land use designation is residential 9. The residential 9 category allows 9 dwelling units per gross acre and a maximum floor area ratio of 0.5. This designation allows for the consideration of agricultural, residential, neighborhood commercial, office uses, multi-purpose projects, and mixed-use development. Other future land use categories near the subject site include suburban mixed use 6 to the north, residential 9 and community mixed use 12 to the east and west, and urban mixed use 20 to the west. The applicant is proposing to amend the future land use category to suburban mixed use 6. The suburban mixed use 6 category allows for 6 dwelling units per gross acre and a maximum floor area ratio of 0.5. This designation allows for the consideration of agricultural, residential, neighborhood commercial, office uses, research, corporate park uses, light industrial, multi-purpose, and clustered residential and or mixed use. Under the existing residential 9 future land use, the site could be considered for a maximum of 39 dwelling units or 94,960 square feet of non-residential uses. Under the proposed future land use designation of suburban mixed use 6, the site could be considered for a maximum of 26 dwelling units and 94,960 square feet of non-residential uses. And during the rezoning process, commercial locational criteria may affect the allowable square footage for potential non-residential development. The proposed amendment would decrease residential density and would not increase the potential of commercial intensity, but the proposed request will increase the allowable range of uses to include light industrial uses. This concludes my presentation for HCCPA 2538, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions from the commissioners on this one? Not seen. Commissioner Kugler.
Thank you. This is not landlocked, is it, this property?
No, so it's a portion of map. It's a portion of 2 parcels. The parcels were originally had a split between the nation. So it's the amending portion of the parcel. So they will still have both residential 9 and SMU 6, suburban mixed use 6 on the site, but they only wanted to amend this specific 4.36 acres.
Okay.
I had a question too.
Yes.
Leave this map up there, HTV. It looks like somebody did an offset of the highway, and that's how we got the land use categories on this. It's weird the way they're just cutting through different properties there. That Res 9 line versus the suburban mixed use 6 line, and even the community mixed use 12, you know, to the east of it there. That what is going on? Like, is that really the way it is out there? That's really odd.
That is the way the map was drawn. I think you probably are correct that there was some sort of distance off of the roadway that it was drawn. The original land use categories were drawn at some point.
All right. That was my only 2 cents. Are there any other questions or comments from the commissioners? Not seeing any. Well, thank you for the information. Look forward to it coming back. And we will move on to item number 5, our executive director's report.
Good afternoon, Melissa Zornita, Executive Director. There are a couple of things at your desk, the first of which is my normal report of activities. Wanted to highlight a couple of things. I did have the opportunity to share the Planning and Design Awards won by the Tampa CRA with Tampa City Council at a presentation at the beginning of November. We've had a couple of meetings with journalists, one with the Tampa Bay Times, one just last week with the Tampa Bay Business Journal. The Times is more interested in some of the ongoing update of the Tampa Comprehensive Plan, and the Tampa Bay Business Journal is working on a piece about the urbanization of rural areas, and so was interested in our urban expansion area study. We had an all-staff retreat in the middle of November. We had some training on internal and client communications, and also it was held at Feeding Tampa Bay, so we had an opportunity in the afternoon to do some giving back to the community by volunteering at their facility. I got the opportunity to participate in 2 schools with the teach-in. We had a presentation to Tampa City Council on the redistricting process. They were very pleased with what they heard about how that was proceeding. And I was a panelist at a ULI presentation on the art of the pivot. My portion was talking about how we've had to adjust to different community concerns throughout and change some of our projects. Had some recent experience with that, in fact, but a lot over my career. On the back side of the page, just a reminder that in January we have your regular meeting, but we also have the joint meeting with the Plant City Commission on January 26th. That's from 3:30 to 5 at the Trinkle Center in Plant City. This will be a discussion around the results of their visioning effort and then what issues you all collectively want to make sure are handled in their update of their comprehensive plan. So looking forward to having that joint discussion with both boards. We have some exciting news that we've learned from facilities that they work programmed in their budget to upgrade this room. The dais that you're sitting at has been in existence at least as long as I've worked here, so that's like 20 some plus years and maybe longer, Tracy? Yeah, so it's, they identified that it was in need of an upgrade. There will be some changes that are made to modernize it, like you'll get plugs that you don't have to go underneath the dais to access, and even some that you can just do the USB-C or USB into to charge things. They're going to lengthen it a little bit here so the clerk has some more room on this end. They're also giving us new carpet. They're going to add a panic button for up by the chair, and a security camera over in that corner that can see the whole room that will connect to their camera room that I guess the security folks downstairs have access to. So we're working with them on the timing of when that'll occur. They optimistically think they could get it done in between two of your meetings, but we'll see how that goes. And if we, and it probably won't happen until like February, March timeframe, but wanted to let you know that that was being worked on. I also provided at your seats, I had attached an FY26 work projects to my report that was provided in advance. Chair Joseph had a good suggestion that we identify which items in the work projects list are mandated items, and then which items are things that are more, are not mandated by state law or so we've separated the list into two sections. I provide that because I thought as we were having a number of discussions around different things we should study, corridors like the Beta Bay corridor, that it would be helpful for you all to have some context to the other items that we're working on. I often report on them kind of in isolation as part of my report each month, but thought you having context to the collective things that we're working on would be helpful. So the green column are things that are ongoing and existing projects that we've already started work on. The blue column are ongoing but reoccurring projects. So things like review of comprehensive plan amendments. We get them in every month. So I reported on what the most current cycles included, but every month we're getting more in, so those continue to occur. And then pending projects are ones that we have identified that either need to be done for consistency of the plans and meeting state mandates, but also then ones that have been requested either by the local governments, by you all, or just proactive items that we have identified that need to be tackled. And I would be happy. The only other thing I had in my report is you can see on the back of the second page the update on plan amendments and the status of those. I won't walk through each of those individually, but I'm happy to answer questions on any of this.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments, thoughts from the commissioners on any of this? Oh, Commissioner Linkus.
I was just curious if I think it's the Marisol, did the Davis Island Hotel project go before City Council yet?
It has not. No,
Not
it
yet.
has not. Yeah.
Commissioner Lau.
Two questions. One, are we going to have codified structure around this panic button so the chair doesn't get a little crazy with it? That's the first one.
We can
Two,
talk
can
about
you
that.
jog my memory on Pruitt and Mango? That looks like an interesting one to me, where staff and us found it consistent, but it was not
No, we
adopted. Or we found it inconsistent, but it was adopted.
Yeah,
Sorry.
they did
A little
adopt it.
backwards on that one.
So that one was the northwest corner of Pruitt and 579, so north of where Lily just showed the expansion of the urban, or no, Alexis showed that one, with the expansion of the urban service area. So north of that, and they were asking to go to light industrial planned, and the staff finding, which you all agreed with, was that on that side of Pruitt, that far north, it was becoming a more residential development pattern, and there were some compatibility concerns. The County Commission had the opportunity to see the rezoning with a site plan. That's what that land use category requires, and based on that, felt comfortable that the compatibility had been addressed.
Good stuff, thanks.
Sure thing. I just thought his joke about the panic button did remind me that the security folks downstairs and for the building when they came and we talked about all of this, they did suggest that at some point we have a discussion about what we would do in the event of an emergency, how we would not perhaps all rush out the back door and create a log jam, but that's where we need to exit. That, in some instances, depending on what happens here, we might have to crawl out the back door. They said an ounce of prevention really is a good practice here to keep everyone from panicking if something does happen. So if it's all right with you all, I'll probably invite them to come to a meeting and us talk about that, because I feel like they're have more expertise in that than I do. Okay, thank you.
All right. Any other comments, questions for our executive director? Not seeing any. We'll thank you for your information.
Thank you.
We will move on to business, other business, chair's business, and/slash old business. I wanted to bring up our discussion from last month on the urban service boundary. We saw a presentation earlier this evening on the status, but we had some discussions about possibly putting forward an action or having staff look into the idea of removing the urban service boundary and some other possible options. I didn't know if Ms. Zornita had any further thoughts on it, or obviously you gave us this kind of list of things going on with staff to let us know that we have a lot of things going on. I've since, thought about it some more also, and I'm sort of thinking that before we direct Ms. Zornita to direct staff to expend the resources, we might want to bring this before the Board of County Commissioners to sort of put a thermometer in the water to see if it's something they would even want to agree with or even talk about, because if we direct staff to do it and then it goes to the Board of County Commissioners, they're the final decision makers, and they say no, then it's kind of a moot point. So I just figured I'd open it up to some discussion and further thoughts on all that. I know Commissioner Lauk was big on getting rid of the urban service area, so I didn't know if he had some thoughts and opinions on how he might want it to move forward or changes in ideas on things like that. Ms. Zornita?
Sure. We did have a lot of discussion as staff around this topic. I think some of our biggest concerns you already mentioned. One, we have this major urban expansion area study, many thousands of acres, and we don't want that to get derailed in any way. That was directed by the board. It's moving on a pretty quick pace to have recommendations by the fall. And some of those recommendations may be very telling to this conversation, because the consultants are being challenged to look at how to plan for the infrastructure for those areas, the new growth, and what tools, policies, approaches need to be utilized for that. And we've told them not to be constrained by just how the urban service area operates today. So it could be that they come up with some approaches that would be beneficial to this larger conversation. The only other feedback I would add is that, yes, in discussions with some of the county administration, they think it would be wise to have, if you all want us to do something as big as a look at removing the urban service area, they see that there are a lot of, that has tentacles into a lot of land development code, technical manuals, things like that. And so they think it would be good to have the county commission weigh in on that before a lot of resources are spent.
All right. Commissioner Kugler.
Yes, Chair Joseph, I liked your idea the last time, and I thought about it quite a bit over the last couple of weeks. And it's sort of like flipping the coin. Rather than, if it turns out that the urban service area is not working the way we had intended, we'd have to fix it or change it. And there's a lot of requests to, especially around Plant City, I noticed a lot of requests to expand it, as if the perfect place to have property is right on the edge of the service area, right? And it's not really pushing the development we want to see back into the center as much. But my concern was if we get rid of this urban service area, maybe at the same time, sort of like take off the gas and play with the clutch a little bit, can we also create protected zones? Because that's really what we're about. We either force the development here or it sprawls, and sprawl is the worst thing for a lot of our areas in the county.
Good points. Yeah. Commissioner Bowden.
Well, yeah, and just to build on what you were saying, what I see the dissipation of the urban service core, I think that you create that potential for a sprawl, and then people start to expand out. Then what happens to the core? You know, maybe you look at some type of incentive to increase the density, you know, working your way out versus, you know, because we know further out the land is going to be cheaper, so it's automatically it's going to be, let's go that route. Whereas, you know, you may have 30, 40 acres, you know, within the core that can be developed as well. And since we're talking about increasing the density, also looking at transportation, then the core would be, you know, I've always thought about the core being the place to go, but without the that boundary, then, you know, maybe if I was a developer, I'm going to, you know, to minimize my cost and to build where I can.
Good points. I'll also add to it. My thoughts have kind of changed. I mean, obviously, I'm still with the extreme, this agency, and I'm definitely would like for Ms. Zornita to bring it to the Board of County Commissioners to get some input on this. But I'm thinking in the counterbalance to the extreme of getting rid of the urban service boundary, last time I spoke about some other boundaries that we could use, I think it might be a better idea for this agency to look at being sort of a middleman, middlewoman in the road, and to start to do things like finding key performance indicators or looking out at maybe a smaller horizon, call it 10 years just to be wild. We'd have to figure out what that time frame is. But starting to set up these sorts of research areas like this is after we expand the urban service area, Little Manatee, I-4, what time frame and what areas are going to be the next areas we want to look at to expand. And I think that does two things. It sort of phases development, and it also helps the development community know what's happening next, right? That's a big thing for the development community. They don't like the surprises. They need to be able to plan and finance things. I think if we start to take this sort of phased approach, you know, and counterbalance to just removing the urban service boundary, looking at that phased approach, again, indicators so we can understand whether or not the areas, Little Manatee and I-4, 10 years from now, whether what we thought was going to happen happened. So I think that might be a better area for us to use our resources, but either or, I'd like for you to go have a talk with, you know, the big board and obviously development services and those folks to gauge whether or not there's any interest in that, you know what I mean? If the Board of County Commissioners isn't interested, this is all their show, so makes no sense us spinning our wheels, you know what I mean? But instead of just grabbing, you know, an FDOT map or this map or that map, it may make more sense to do the phased approach and start to look at critical areas of where we're going next, you know, on a certain time frame. So I wanted to throw that out there also. Commissioner Jemison.
In regards to Plant City, the city has an aggressive, I'll say, annexation campaign to move boundaries. Obviously, we're boxed in to the east by Polk County and Lakeland. So to move south into the east and really defining what that's going to look like with the county would probably be a good conversation that we're probably already working on with the staff over there. But the city definitely wants to square up its lines and kind of define what its goals are.
Commissioner Linkus.
It sounds like I might have missed a couple things about this because it's just somewhat new to me, but I guess it's just an interesting conversation. In my research and in my teaching, I am an advocate for urban growth boundaries and urban service areas. I do understand in particular the urban service area to be an important tool for fiscal responsibility in terms of managing the way infrastructure is expanded. So I'm just curious what the rationale for thinking about eliminating it is. I do see the framing of whether something's inside the urban service area or outside the urban service area as being really critical to every single decision. It's the foremost piece that we look at when we kind of come make these decisions. So foremost, I think it's about the infrastructure and the fiscal responsibility as far as where infrastructure can expand, but it directs other things like the land use. And I think it gives property owners a certain assurance around their property rights of what kind of place they're invested in. So I'd just be curious what problem we're solving and what other resources might be out there. And I also do want to say, it sounds like there's been a shift in thinking that I would agree with a lot with your proposal regarding more forethought about where this could happen, where these things could happen. One of the pieces that I've always advocated for is that some communities do like a reserve, and they pre-identify the criteria by which certain lands can be added into the urban service area. So they've pre-identified the land and they pre-identify the trigger. So this much of the population, in 20 years anticipated to come in. I think that would really be an enhancement to our process and procedure and kind of create a much more efficient piece than what we've kind of gone through in the last year where we're looking piecemeal. So I would love to see something like that, and I would be in favor of something like that.
Well, I'll just say the reason for, because you weren't here, the reason for I wanted to tip off the new year with us just being in the news, but the reason I thought of getting rid of the urban service boundary, it's something that Commissioner Lauk has brought up in the past. When we first got the direction of Board of County Commissioners to look at these areas, Commissioner Lauk raised the point, well, why do we even have this boundary? Anecdotally, you're right. If I go back and read and book, I can find how urban service boundaries always direct growth to where we want it to. Herewith, we sit with a 30-year urban service boundary that's never done that. So my point was, if it's never done it, what are we doing? Okay, what we're doing is we're hiding behind the line, and if we get rid of it, what's going to happen is it's going to force people in the county to start doing their job. It's going to force development services to have to, like Commissioner Kugler said, create little pockets of areas to protect environmental areas, to protect communities. We're going to have to relook at the land development code. We're going to have to relook at the comp plan. So it forces us to really understand and start to really make decisions that guide growth instead of just giving these anecdotal stories about how lines on the map always direct growth to a certain area. But again, 30 years of proof right here in Hillsborough County shows it hasn't worked. So the idea wasn't to just radically get rid of it and let sprawl go everywhere in some, again, anecdotal nightmare. The idea was if we get rid of it, it's going to force people to have to take a real hard look at how we're developing, where we're developing, and make some tough decisions about how we go forward. So that was the rationale behind it. And of course, it could go the other way. They could release it and then sprawl could go everywhere, but I would hope that our elected officials are wiser than that, and also the people in the departments at the county are wiser than that, and it would again force them to sort of look at the realities of what's going on. So that's where that came from. Any other?
I would just add that we do track and have tracked over time the county's goal of 80% of growth going in the urban service area, which I guess to some degree is about, speaks to that directing the growth. And we have consistently met that. What we've identified is that there's not enough land left in the urban service area to keep meeting that. And that's why we needed to expand, and we have in Waimama and Baum, and we're working on these 2 additional larger areas. I think there is a good alignment between some of the infrastructure planning that so my understanding of why it was started was to guide the infrastructure planning, like for water and sewer, and maybe at the time transportation. I don't know that transportation has worked that well, and because we haven't kept up with some of it, but the water and sewer folks, I would say, use this quite a bit. They're now going back and trying to retrofit it. It's kind of got left over, like Palm River, Gibson, and they have a program to bring sewer to the places that still have septic tanks, and have prioritized that maybe over going outward based on our urban service area and that infrastructure planning. It has very much gotten interwoven into a lot of other things. The some of the design standards in the land development code, some of the community plans really rely on that they're going to be rural and hold that down more than the land use category as the reason why they're going to stay rural. And I think that's a little misplaced about the land use category. We probably 8 or 9 years ago now, we looked at if you put infrastructure somewhere, does that necessarily change the land use pattern? Not necessarily. You could have functions in the rural area and stay rural if you keep the land use category the same. If you change the land use category, then of course we're going to have a different development pattern. But in many ways, topics have gotten conflated over the 30 years of the use of the tool.
And I think also I did a little more research into it. I looked more at of things, implements and structure. There seems to be kind of an in and out game that's played, and this isn't my purview, and they'll deal with that at the big board. But it's interesting to me to see how the county breaks up where it takes money into and where it puts the money back out to in infrastructure. I think those maps, those areas of the county that they have broken up into different areas, I think it would. If you got rid of the urban service boundary, it forces a discussion of that too. Where's money, who's paying the taxes, and where is that tax money being spent, and for what reason? And that's a big question that's not this board's purview. I don't want to get into those discussions, but again, if you don't have that urban service boundary to hide behind, it kind of forces those discussions at higher levels. So again, that's was part of the rationale behind it. It's more of a forcing mechanism, at least for me. I'll let Commissioner Locke speak for himself. Commissioner Love.
Well, regardless of whether we think it's a good idea or not, I think hopefully we can agree that this current situation isn't tenable in terms of how it's being used and deployed. We've had multiple instances of developers coming in wanting to expand the urban service area again and again and again, which wasn't the original intent. I think the first time that happened, I think I voted against it, and I said, look, we're either going to have it or we're not. We need to enforce it or we don't. And if we're going to point the situation functioning as it should, and it bears looking, which is one of the reasons the board asked us to do a study. Specific to the board, I love county commissioners and grant them all due respect, and I might get myself a little trouble here. We were appointed by our various bodies not to be just knee-jerk and do exactly what those boards tell us. We are a body that's supposed to advise. And to say we're going to go to the board and say, should we do this, should we not do this, is it going to be dead or arrival? That's the wrong, I think, approach. I think the right approach is it the right thing to do philosophically for the long-term viability of the county and the development in the county? And if we think it is as a board, then we should investigate it. Or if we think it might be, then we should at least investigate it. We currently have a study in place. It's in flight. And when I hear quick and great momentum and fall of 2026, we might get something that, with all due respect to the staff and to the folks doing the work, that doesn't sound fast to me. That sounds glacially slow for how long it's been out, for fall of 2026. So I would hope we could expedite that a little bit and add a wrinkle to it, since we already have the money out there and the work being done. What does it look like if we tighten it up and put an absolute boundary around it? You can't build outside it. What does it look like if we take it away completely? So if we just add those wrinkles to that study, we already have a consultant that's doing some of that work for us. And I think that's a viable thing to look at. I make the point all the time, there are major municipalities all over this country that don't have a growth rate. And the ones that do have historically had slower growth, and they've had more expensive housing and more expensive cost of living. Over and over, it's proven true. So I'm obviously an advocate for it, but I want to make sure that we're doing it smart and not just knee-jerk going about it. So I would advocate regardless of what how the conversation goes with the board, when you kind of lean in on that, I would say we should instruct the current group doing the work to investigate it.
We can certainly see what can be accommodated within the scope. There's a good bit of community outreach, and that's part of what is driving the timeline. But we can see if within their existing scope they can look at those additional things. I don't know the answer today.
I would check, and I'd push back a little, like I said last time, on what Commissioner Lauk said. I'd like to keep those two things separate. The Board of County Commissioners directed that study. The Board of County Commissioners gave the money for that study. I get that you're bold. I get that you want to tell the Board of County Commissioners what to do, but I think being respectful to them, you know, that study needs to get done the way they want it done. And if we want to then do something different or do something in tandem, we can do that. Piggybacking on what they did, I think, is not the best thing, and that's, you know, just my opinion.
No, that's fantastic. That's great background. I'd forgotten that. So that's really good nuance in terms of who issued the study and what the scope of it was. So maybe we could try to get along the same timeline and augment that study and add some findings from staff, or maybe do our own. But point taken, very well taken on that.
All right, Commissioner Linkus.
I just wanted to add that I do, my understanding of this function in our community is that it really serves important purposes in terms of complying with the state statutes around planning. I do believe that there's a lot of guidance around clear separation between urban and rural. And then there are often kind of programs that come about that are about infrastructure funding for urban areas or rural economic development strategies, and that having this framework in place does kind of support, I think, Ms. Ornita said, you know, this has multiple ways of implications, and there's a lot of different, so from the land use, from the economic development, from the funding, and from compliance with state statute, we are supposed to demonstrate that the plan clearly separates urban and rural areas. And this is such a straightforward tool for doing that. I think, you know, without something that calls things as simple as that, which is what the state statute calls it, it could get confusing and unclear. So I think that the history of probably why we have this is very much in conformance with the history of the state's policy framework. And to me, it's a very clear way of being in alignment with it.
All right, good points. Commissioner Kugler.
Yes, I was wondering if we take a firmer stand in our advice to the Board of County Commissioners, and they side with us more, maybe we would tighten up that spilling out effect on the urban service area. I don't know.
Good points, Commissioner Kugler. Commissioner Linkus.
I guess I still feel a little bit full of questions around if developers are applying to expand the urban service area. I'm not sure that that's a rationale for getting rid of it. I just feel like there needs to be a little bit more information about what it's not doing, other than that people would like to have more development in the rural areas.
I just like to be clear to allay fears. We're not talking about getting rid of it. We're talking about looking at the idea of getting rid of it, right? Getting rid of it or not, we'll make a recommendation based on consistency with the comp plan, and the Board of County Commissioners will make the final decision on whether or not to get rid of it. But again, that's not the decision being made here. We're talking about just looking at the idea, considering it. Because again, the Board of County Commissioners thought it was a good time to expand it. We kind of rushed to get that going. The consultants got that going through their blessing. And the thought just came to me, well, while we have that going, you know, why aren't we kind of looking at these broader ideas? Why are we knee-jerking back to what we know instead of taking a hard look at better ways for this county to go forward in the future?
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting when you look at a county like Broward County. Broward County doesn't have one. Some of its sister counties do. In Jacksonville, the unified government up there does not have a growth ring. So there are ways to manage growth without the urban service boundary. Again, I'm not advocating one way or the other. I would like to see a study and see what it says. I don't think it makes a lot of sense financially, fiscally for the community, but we do have that in place, and it's a legacy law that would be tough to disentangle. And some of the study is going to talk about that and walk us through some of the things where the impacts would be. And maybe it's not the right decision, but I think the right decision is to at least investigate and take a look at it.
Ms. Zornita.
So I think, since I'm hearing some different opinions, it would be helpful for me to one, have some clear direction on whether or not you would like us to, I mean, I've given some thought as to what a study like this would entail in terms of need to understand the implications for the existing regulations, processes that occur within the county, understand best practices from other communities, look at what some of those places you just mentioned, how they're managing growth and they're doing their infrastructure planning. Perhaps, I think there's probably a role to understand how this would impact some of our stakeholders, like the development community. So that's not an insignificant body of work to do that. I did provide you this list of projects somewhat for a reason, to make clear, like, I have staff, you know, with a full workload. I don't have capacity and staff sitting around waiting for a project like this. So we would probably need some additional resources or to shift some of the other priorities on this list. So perhaps if it's the direction from the commission, we come back with a bit more fleshed out idea of what needs to be done. Then you all can decide whether or not, I still think it's probably a good idea before we embark on that body of work, given what I think it will take, that we get some concurrence from the Board of County Commissioners that they want us to do that investigation. Because it will potentially take away and delay other things.
I agree, and I'd push back on you a little bit, Commissioner Lauck. I didn't intend to mean that we're asking necessarily for their permission to go forward. What I meant by taking this to the Board of County Commissioners now is, you know, if they have no intention of doing anything with this and they just don't want to hear about it, yes, we have a responsibility to the community. We can spend time and resources studying it, but again, we have legal mandated things we need to get done. We have things we're doing for other municipalities. So maybe, you know, us having this study that we want to have happen and no one else is interested in gets pushed out further. Whereas if we take it to the Board of County Commissioners and they say, oh no, absolutely, this is something we want to know too. We want to know it now. We probably should have done it in our study. Then we know that's something we need to jump on immediately and find the resources for immediately. So that's kind of why I said I wanted Ms. Zornita to take it to the big board and have a discussion with them. The point she raises is also pertinent, that if we do take on something like this, we're going to need help with resources from all the departments of the county. Like we all agree, it's going to have tentacles everywhere, you know, development services down to capital improvements, water department, all these departments, ELAP, I'm sure it'll even impact, right? It's going to have tentacles in everything, and we're going to need help from all these people. So again, it's not necessarily asking permission. We can go off like cowboys and do what we want to do, but, you know, we have to sort of gauge things where we want to put our efforts and where we don't want to put our efforts. So that's really what I kind of saw in going to the Board of County Commissioners. I wasn't asking them for an action to say do this or not do this, but is it something you're interested in? Is it something we need to jump on immediately was more what I was thinking.
Agreed.
Are there any other thoughts or comments from the Commissioner Linkus?
I guess if there were to be continued discussion of this topic, I think it would be useful for this group to better articulate what the concerns are. So is it an infrastructure funding concern? Is it allowing development or not allowing development in certain areas? And that could certainly narrow the scope of what such a study would be and make it more fiscally responsible to kind of launch an investigation and more perhaps realistic for the staff to look at. So I think maybe it's a valuable discussion to have and to begin to kind of think about what are the issues that we're trying to fix with this.
Absolutely. This was only the second of these discussions. I introduced it at the last meeting in my chair's business and surprised everyone with it. So you're absolutely right. This is not taking off like a rocket. This is something that needs to be discussed and honed down a little bit more before it gets any real sort of legs. So you're still at the very early phases. I see you, Commissioner Sink, also furrowing your eyebrow. It's still early. We're not doing anything wild just yet. We're just discussing it and seeing where we want to go with it. So good points, Commissioner Linkus. Are there any other thoughts or discussions? Do you want a directive from us on what to do here? Or do you feel confident on what you're doing next?
I think my next step if I'm understanding correctly, is, so nodded heads would help, is to bring back sort of a scope of what this might look like. And would bringing that back to your February meeting be acceptable, since the January meeting is like right after the holidays?
I think that's fine.
Okay, all right.
And would you go talk to Development Services and the board also in that interim, or is that something you look at doing after?
Well, I don't have a time to talk, that I know of,
Get
to
on their
talk to them
schedule.
as a whole,
Mhm.
but we do have one-on-one briefings that
Okay.
we're planning on the urban expansion area study, so I could get some indication one-on-one from them, I think, by the February meeting.
Okay.
I just think it would probably help them in a public setting to have something to react to.
Okay.
So we could do a public discussion of it with them after we have some agreement on the
On it with
scope.
us. Okay.
Yeah.
And would the item that's coming back to us in February be a briefing or an action item or just a general update?
I think I would probably put it under action
Should-
items in
okay.
case you want to
Very
take
good.
action on it.
Very good.
Yeah.
All right. Any other thoughts or questions from the commissioners? No? All right. I'm going to shut down the chair's business because I've made enough wildness in the night. So are you okay, Commissioner Loud?
I don't know. I somehow feel like I'm taking the blame for your wildness. I heard my name thrown out there a lot.
All right. Well, you're my panic button, so until it gets replaced, you're it. All right. On to old business, new business. Anybody have any new business for us? Not seeing any. All right. Committee reports. Are there any committee reports? Commissioner Bowden.
Yeah, with the AHAB committee last month, they granted, I forget the dollar amount, but they actually provided a grant to an organization which are doing a test of modular homes. They've identified that the cost and is less, and then the speed of actually building the homes are faster. So that's something I think they're going to look at it for 6 to 8 months and see if it's feasible to actually move in that direction.
Okay.
In that conversation, we also talked about the potential of tiny homes as well as the container homes as well. But like I said, the modular homes is the thing that they've been granted funded for.
All right. Very good. All right. Were there any other committee reports? I had a brief committee report. We had a TPO. I can't remember whether it's a board or a special meeting right now, but it was the end of November-ish time period. We didn't really do much. Director Wong gave us kind of a business report on where the TPO was at business-wise. It was actually a pretty good report. I think it was modeled off of things we do here at the Planning Commission, which I thought was a breath of fresh air at the TPO to be able to get a look under the hood, if you will, and see what they're doing and what they've achieved in the past year. So it was received very well by the TPO board. They were very happy to have that information because we're going into our process of review for Director Wong. So that was a good little bit of information. I think that was the only real action item we had at that meeting that was of any significance. Let me double check here. Business operations, our calendar. Yeah, and we reviewed the regional MPO principles workshop we had out in Clearwater. That's the workshop we had with Hillsborough County, City of Tampa, Temple Terrace, Plant City representatives, and then representatives from Pasco County and Pinellas County talking about the merged MPO. There was a mix of opinions. We got into a lot of discussions about what the electeds want to see out of that merged MPO, so there was a lot of talk about that. But again, it was just a review of the workshop, so there was no action going forward. The SCTPA and TMA group met on, or is going to be meeting on the 12th, so that's more of the group that takes action on things, so that those developments are still to come. I have another TPO board meeting Wednesday of this week, so I will report to you back in January on what comes out of that meeting. Any questions or comments for me, or I guess Commissioner Bowden, on any of those committee reports? Not seeing any. Oh, go. Your mic. Oh, microphone.
Yes, the River Board meeting, very interesting, first time, and met some very interesting people there. One woman who sat next to me was from the Army Corps of Engineers, had an amazing mapping system that not just doesn't just show rivers and streams and so on. It showed underwater flows in pretty much every plot of land you want. So it's amazing. We talked about living shorelines as rebuilding for some of the bay, and we had the same presentations we had today on the planned environmental community, planned conservation community. Well, the one up in the border with Pasco County.
Okay. All right. Very good. Any more questions, comments, reports from the planning commissioners? Not seeing any, then that is about it. And what time is our first? 5:30 is our first public hearing. So at 4:57 p.m., this regular meeting is adjourned.